She was invisible to everyone in that room. The billionaire who snapped his fingers at her, the foreign investors who laughed in Mandarin, certain no one understood, the CFO who had already sold his soul. They saw a waitress in a black apron, nothing more. But Elena Marlowe heard every poisoned word. And when the pen touched the paper that would destroy a man's empire and orphan his little girl, the quietest woman in New York finally spoke. If you stay with me until the end, you'll see how one whispered sentence changed 3 lives forever. Hit that like button and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. Now, let me take you inside the Meridian Room on the rainiest Tuesday Manhattan had seen all year. The rain had been falling on Manhattan since 4 in the afternoon, the kind of slow, patient rain that didn't bother trying to rush anyone. By 7, the streets along Park Avenue had turned to black mirrors, reflecting the headlights of taxis and the soft amber glow of doormen's lamps. Inside the Meridian Room, the rain was just a soundtrack, muffled behind triple-paned glass and heavy velvet curtains, the color of dried blood. The Meridian Room was the kind of restaurant most New Yorkers had never heard of, and that was the point. There was no sign on the door, no menu in the window. The reservation list was kept in a leather book by a woman named Margot, who had been the maitre d' for 26 years and who could remember the dietary preferences of every senator, oil heir, and Saudi prince who had ever passed under her chandeliers. The chandeliers themselves were Austrian, hand-cut, and worth more than most people's homes. The tablecloths were changed between courses. The waiters wore black ties and silent shoes. Elena Marlowe was one of those waiters, except she was a waitress, and her shoes weren't silent so much as careful. She had learned in her 11 months at the Meridian that the trick wasn't to walk softly. The trick was to walk like you weren't there at all. She was 30 years old, and she looked younger because she was small and because she kept her dark hair pulled back so severely that it seemed to erase her forehead. She had a long neck and a thin nose and eyes that were a strange, pale brown, almost gold under the right light. She wasn't beautiful, not in the way the women who ate at the Meridian were beautiful. Those women had been engineered. Elena had simply been born, and the world had not been particularly kind about it since. She moved through the dining room now with a tray balanced on her left palm. 3 glasses of San Pellegrino with lemon, no ice, exactly the way Mr. Hadley liked it. Mr. Hadley was at table 4 with his mistress and his accountant, and Elena had served him every Tuesday for 6 months without him ever once looking at her face. She didn't mind. Being unseen was a skill, and Elena had been practicing it since she was a child. Marlowe. The voice was Margot's, low and clipped. Elena turned without spilling a drop. Yes, ma'am? Table 11, the private room. Margot's eyes flicked toward the back of the restaurant, where a hallway led to 4 soundproofed dining suites used for the kind of business that didn't get done in conference rooms. Mr. Cross's party, 5 guests. He requested his usual server, but Daniel called in sick. I'll take it. You'll be fine, Margot said, and it wasn't quite a question. He's particular. I know who he is. Everyone in New York knew who Adrian Cross was. He was on the cover of a business magazine almost every month. He had built Cross Holdings from a single warehouse in Queens into a logistics empire worth somewhere north of $9 billion, depending on which analyst you asked. He was 32 years old. He was a widower. He had a 5-year-old daughter named Sophie, whose photograph appeared every now and then in the society pages, always partially obscured because Adrian Cross was protective of her in a way that bordered on paranoid. He was also, by every account Elena had ever overheard, a difficult man. Not cruel, exactly, just impatient in a way that made other people's time feel cheap. She squared her shoulders, picked up the leather-bound wine list and the bottle of Krug that Margot had already decanted, and walked toward the private room. The hallway smelled like beeswax and old wood. Elena paused outside the door, listened for a moment to the murmur of voices, and then knocked twice with her knuckle before pushing the door open. The first thing she saw was Adrian Cross. He was sitting at the head of an oval table, leaning back in his chair with his sleeves rolled up to the elbows, a fountain pen turning slowly between his fingers. He had black hair cut short on the sides and longer on top, and he had the kind of jawline that magazine retouchers didn't have to do anything to. His shirt was white, his tie was black. His eyes were a gray so cold they looked almost silver, and they swept over Elena once, registered nothing, and went back to the man across the table from him. The man across the table was Vincent Marsh, Cross Holdings' chief financial officer. Elena had served him before, too. He was in his 50s, thick around the middle, with sandy hair that was thinning at the crown, and a smile that always seemed slightly delayed, as if he had to remember to deploy it. He was smiling now, gently, at the three men seated to Adrian's right. The three men were Chinese. Elena clocked that immediately, not because of how they looked, but because of what they were saying. "Zega mei guoren, zhen shiga sha gua," the eldest of them murmured, lifting his water glass. "This American is a real fool." He said it without moving his lips much. He said it while smiling at Adrian Cross. And Adrian Cross smiled back. Because Adrian Cross didn't speak Mandarin. Elena's hand tightened on the neck of the Krug bottle. "Good evening," she said in English, her voice low and even. "May I offer you the wine, Mr. Cross?" Adrian glanced at her. His gray eyes touched her face for less than a second. "Just pour it," he said. "We're talking." "Of course, sir." She moved to his right. She poured the champagne into the crystal flute at his place setting, then moved around the table, pouring for each of the guests in turn. The eldest of the three Chinese men, the one who had called Adrian a fool, watched her with a polite, distant interest, the way a man might watch a houseplant. She kept her eyes down. She poured. She did not let her hand shake. "Ta chang de butuo," the youngest of the three said in Mandarin, as she leaned over to fill his glass. "She's pretty." "Bie guan ta," the eldest snapped. "Don't bother with her. 她什么都不懂. 这些美国服务员只会笑. She doesn't understand anything. These American servers only know how to smile." The youngest laughed, softly. Elena did not smile. She finished pouring. She stepped back from the table. She placed the bottle in the silver bucket on the sideboard, exactly the way she had been trained, and she folded her hands in front of her apron and waited. "Will there be anything else, sir?" she asked Adrian. "No," Adrian said without looking at her. "We'll order in 15 minutes. "Of course." She turned to leave. "Dung dung," the eldest said in Mandarin. "Wait." And then in heavily accented English, "Young lady, one moment." Elena turned back. She arranged her face carefully. "Yes, sir?" The man smiled at her. He had very white teeth and very black eyes, and a small, neat mustache that was beginning to gray at the edges. He was perhaps 60. His suit was beautifully tailored, dark gray with a subtle pinstripe, and his cufflinks were jade. Elena understood, looking at him, that he was the kind of man who had not poured his own coffee in 30 years. "Could you bring us a pot of jasmine tea?" he said. "Hot, please, not too hot. My friends and I, we are old men. We need our tea." His friends were not old. The youngest looked 35 at most. "Of course, sir," Elena said. "Right away." She turned and walked out of the room and closed the door behind her, and only then did she let her shoulders drop, just a fraction, just enough to take a breath. In the kitchen, the head chef was screaming at a sous chef about a duck. Elena threaded her way past them to the tea station and put the kettle on. She set out a small black ceramic pot, the one they used for jasmine, and she stood there with her hand on the warm porcelain and tried to think. She thought about her father. Her father had been a Mandarin teacher in Queens, a quiet man from a village in Zhejiang who had come to America in 1989 and had married a Polish-American woman from Greenpoint and had named his only daughter Elena because his wife had wanted her to sound American and had named her in his own language, privately, Mei Lin, which meant beautiful jade, because he was a sentimental man underneath everything else. He had taught Elena Mandarin from the time she could speak. He had read to her every night from a book of Tang Dynasty poetry that she still kept on her bedside table. He had died of a stroke when she was 24, and she had not had a proper conversation in Mandarin with anyone since. But she could still hear it. She could still understand every word. The language lived in her like a second heartbeat, quiet, patient, waiting. The kettle clicked. She poured. She arranged the pot in 5 small cups on a lacquered tray. She added a sprig of dried jasmine to the saucer beside the pot, the way her father had taught her, and she lifted the tray and walked back down the hallway to the private room. She paused outside the door again. She listened. 所以那家公司根本不存在, the eldest was saying. So the company doesn't actually exist. 只是一个空壳，文件没问题，律师没问题，但是后面什么都没有. It's just a shell. The paperwork is fine, the lawyers are fine, but there's nothing behind it. Marsh先生处理得怎么样? The youngest asked. How is Mr. Marsh handling it? The eldest laughed, a low, dry laugh. Marsh先生已经收到他的钱了，他的瑞士账户3000万美元，上个星期。Mr. Marsh has already received his money, his Swiss account, $30 million last week. Elena did not move. She did not breathe. 黑通以前公司就是我们的，吃安债务，隐藏的负债。Once the contract is signed, the company is ours. Offshore debt, hidden liabilities. 他6个月内会破产. He'll be bankrupt in 6 months. 而那个小女孩, the third man said. He had not spoken before. His voice was softer than the others. And the little girl. 他的女儿，她会失去一切. His daughter, she'll lose everything. 那不关我们的事, the eldest said. That's not our problem. There was a small silence. Elena stood in the hallway with the tea tray in her hands, and she felt something happen inside her chest that she could not name. It was not anger, exactly. It was older than anger. It was the feeling she'd had at her father's funeral, when the priest had mispronounced his name and no one had corrected him. It was the feeling she'd had at 16, when a boy at school had asked her if her eyes were real, and she had not known how to answer. It was the feeling of being seen wrong, over and over, and now, finally, of seeing other people exactly right. She knocked twice. She pushed the door open. Your tea, gentlemen. The conversation stopped, smoothly, the way a river goes silent when a stone drops into it. The eldest smiled at her again. Thank you, my dear. She set the tray on the table. She poured the first cup for him, the way custom required, and she set it before him with both hands. Qingman Yong, she almost said. Please enjoy. She did not say it. She poured the second cup, the third, the fourth, the fifth. She set them down. She straightened. She folded her hands. Adrian Cross was watching her now. He had not looked at her before, but he was looking at her now, and his gray eyes had narrowed slightly, as if some piece of furniture he had not noticed was suddenly out of place. Miss, he said. Yes, sir? You're very quiet. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't say it was a problem. He tilted his head. Just an observation. Elena did not answer. Vincent Marsh, the CFO, cleared his throat. He had a thick gold watch on his left wrist. Elena hadn't noticed it before. It was the kind of watch that cost more than her annual rent, and she wondered very suddenly if it had been bought with the $30 million in the Swiss account. Adrian, Marsh said, shall we get back to it? In a moment, Vincent. Adrian's eyes were still on Elena. Miss, what's your name? Marlowe, sir. First name? Elena. Elena Marlowe. He tested it, the way some men test wine. How long have you worked here, Elena? 11 months, sir. Do you like it? The question caught her off guard. She felt the heat rise in her face, the small, treasonous flush she had never been able to control. It pays my rent, sir. He laughed. It was a short, surprised laugh, and Elena had the strange sensation that he hadn't laughed in a while. Honest answer. He set down his pen. Vincent, did you hear that? Honest answer. From a stranger. Imagine that. Vincent Marsh smiled his delayed smile. Adrian, our friends can wait. Adrian leaned back. Elena, tell me something. Sir? Do you speak any languages? Her mouth went dry. The tea tray was empty in her hands. She set it carefully on the sideboard, and she turned back and she said, I'm sorry, sir. I should get back to my other tables. That isn't an answer. Sir! Elena. His voice was not unkind, but it was the voice of a man who is used to being answered. It's a simple question. She looked at him. She looked at Vincent Marsh. She looked at the three men with their jade cufflinks and their secret smiles, and she felt the moment hanging in the air like a glass held over a marble floor. Spanish, she said. A little French. That's all? That's all, sir. The eldest of the three Chinese men chose that moment to speak. 这个白人女孩很会撒谎, he said pleasantly, smiling at Elena. This white girl is a good liar. Elena's hand twitched once against the seam of her apron. Will that be all, sir? She said to Adrian. He held her eyes for a moment longer than was comfortable. For now, he said. She left the room. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall for 10 full seconds, and she pressed her palms flat against the wood paneling, and she made herself breathe. $30 million. Swiss account, shell company, 6 months to bankruptcy. And the little girl. She was not a brave person. She had never been a brave person. When she was 12, a boy had stolen her notebook in the hallway at school, and she had walked all the way home before she had cried. When she was 22, a man at a bus stop had called her a chink, and she had said, "I'm sorry," before she had understood what was happening. She did not interrupt. She did not raise her voice. She did not make scenes, and there were 1,000 reasons not to make a scene now. She would lose her job. She would be sued, probably, by Adrian Cross or by Vincent Marsh or by the men with the jade cufflinks. She had $900 in her checking account and a sister in Buffalo who needed help with her chemotherapy bills. She could not afford a scene. She could not afford a lawyer. She could not afford to be known. She thought of the little girl, Sophie. That was her name, Sophie Cross. 5 years old. She would lose everything, the soft-voiced man had said, and then the eldest had said, "That's not our problem." Elena pushed herself off the wall. She walked back into the dining room. She picked up an order pad. She went to table 4 and refilled Mr. Hadley's water glass. She brought a dessert menu to the couple at table 7. She took the credit card from Mr. Patterson at the bar, and inside her, something that had been quiet for a very long time was beginning, very slowly, to wake up. 45 minutes later, Margot found her in the wine cellar. "Marlowe." Elena turned. The cellar was cold and smelled like cork and stone. "Yes?" "Cross's party is ordering. He asked for you specifically." "For me?" Margot's eyebrows lifted, fractionally. Margot's eyebrows almost never lifted. "Yes, dear, for you. I don't know what you said to him, but he wants you taking the order personally." "I didn't say anything." Margot's mouth pressed into a line. "Well, don't keep him waiting." Elena set down the bottle of Sancerre she had been holding. Her hands were not shaking, which surprised her. She had expected them to shake. She walked back through the kitchen, past the screaming chef and the broken-hearted sous chef and the dishwasher who had been deported twice and was here on a 3rd visa that he was afraid to talk about. She walked down the hallway. She knocked twice. She walked in. The 5 of them looked up. The Chinese men were drinking their tea. Vincent Marsh had a folder open in front of him, thick with paper. The contract, Elena understood instantly. The contract that would gut Cross Holdings like a fish. Adrian Cross was watching her. "Elena." "Yes, Mr. Cross?" "Sit down." She did not move. "Sir?" "Sit down." He gestured to an empty chair at the corner of the table. "Please." "Mr. Cross, I'm working." "I'm aware. My manager, Margot, works for me indirectly. Cross Holdings holds the lease on this building. Margot will not be a problem." His gray eyes did not leave her face. "Sit down, Elena." She sat down. Vincent Marsh's smile had frozen in place. The Chinese men were staring openly now, no longer pretending to ignore her. "Adrian," Marsh said. His voice was very careful. "What are you doing?" "Vincent." Adrian's tone was light, almost cheerful. "When I was 12 years old, my father took me to a poker game in a hotel in Atlantic City. He told me that the most important person in the room was always the one nobody noticed. The waiter, the driver, the man who fixes the air conditioning. He said, those are the people who hear everything. And the rich men at the table, the ones who think they're winning, they always forget." He turned to Elena. "You've been listening." "Sir, It's a statement, not a question." His voice was very soft now. "Your face changed when our friend made his joke about the white girl." Elena did not breathe. "I'm Chinese," she said, before she could stop herself. "Half. My father was from Zhejiang." The room went absolutely still. The eldest of the Chinese men set down his teacup with the slow, deliberate care of a man placing a bomb. "Ni ting de dong. You understand?" "Wo ting de dong mei ge zi," Elena said. "I understand every word." It was the first time she had spoken Mandarin out loud, to a stranger, in 6 years. The words felt strange in her mouth, like coins she had forgotten the shape of. But they came. They came perfectly. The youngest of the three men whispered something to the eldest. The eldest did not move. Adrian Cross was leaning forward now. His pen was no longer in his hand. "Elena," he said, "what have they been saying?" She looked at him. She looked at Vincent Marsh, whose face had gone the color of old paper. She looked at the contract lying open on the table, $200 million of poison in 14-point font. She looked at the eldest of the three men, and his black eyes were not amused anymore. They were calculating. "Mr. Cross," she said in English, "may I speak to you privately?" "No," Adrian said. "Whatever it is, you'll say it here, in front of all of us." "Sir, I really think—" "Elena." His voice was iron now. "I don't have time for delicate. Speak." She drew in a breath. The eldest of the three men shifted in his chair, and Elena saw his hand move, very slightly, toward the inner pocket of his suit jacket. She did not know what was in the pocket. She did not want to know. "Mr. Cross," she said, "the company you're about to acquire, Pacific Rim Logistics, it doesn't exist." Vincent Marsh laughed. It was a strange, high laugh. "Adrian, this is absurd. The waitress has clearly—" "Vincent, be quiet." The CFO's mouth shut. "Elena," Adrian said, "continue." "It's a shell." Her voice was steadier than she had any right to expect. "The paperwork is real. The lawyers are real. But there's no company behind it. No fleet. No warehouses. No employees. They told each other, in Mandarin, 10 minutes ago. They said you would be bankrupt in 6 months. They said the offshore debt would bury you. They said—" Her throat closed. She forced it open. "They said your daughter would lose everything, and that wasn't their problem." The room had gone so quiet she could hear the rain on the windows 3 rooms away. "And Mr. Marsh," Elena said, and she did not look at Vincent Marsh as she said it, "received $30 million in a Swiss account last week. That's why he's been pushing this deal." Vincent Marsh stood up. He stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward and clattered against the wall. "This is outrageous." Adrian did not look at him. Adrian was looking at Elena, and his gray eyes had changed. They were not cold anymore. They were not bored. They were the eyes of a man who has just realized, very suddenly, that the floor of the room he is standing in is on fire. "Elena," he said, very quietly, "are you certain?" "Yes, sir." "Absolutely certain?" "Yes, sir." He turned then, finally, to the 3 men at his table. His face had gone completely smooth, and Elena understood, watching him, that this was his real face. The bored, impatient, slightly cruel man she had met an hour ago had been a costume. This was Adrian Cross. "Gentlemen," he said in English, "I think our meeting is concluded." The eldest of the 3 men spread his hands. He smiled. "Mr. Cross, whatever this young woman believes she has heard, she heard you." "Mr. Cross, she heard you," Adrian said, "in your own language, and she has just told me what you said, and I believe her." He picked up the contract. He held it for a moment. The heavy stack of paper, the $200 million, the trap that would have destroyed him and his daughter and everything his father had built. He tore it in half. He tore it again. He let the pieces fall to the table. "Get out of my restaurant," he said. Vincent Marsh made a small, choked sound. The eldest of the 3 Chinese men rose slowly to his feet, and his face was very calm, and Elena understood with a sudden cold certainty that this was the most dangerous moment of her life. "Mr. Cross," he said, you are making a very expensive mistake." "I don't think I am." "Pacific Rim Logistics has a great deal of capital invested in this transaction. That capital does not disappear simply because—" "Get out." A waitress, the word was a small, surgical knife, has decided to insert herself into matters she does not. "Get out." Adrian had not raised his voice. He had not needed to. The 2 words had landed in the room like stones into still water, and the 3 men, after a long, considering moment, gathered their coats and their briefcases and their lies, and they left. Vincent Marsh was still standing, frozen, his mouth working. "Adrian, Adrian, you cannot possibly believe—" "Vincent," Adrian said, "sit down." "Adrian, sit down." The CFO sat. Adrian turned back to Elena. She was still in her chair, her hands flat on her knees, her apron still on, her hair still pulled back. She had not moved. She did not think she could move. "Elena Marlowe," Adrian said. I owe you my life. She shook her head. She tried to speak. Her voice would not come. And my daughter's life, he said. He stood up. He walked around the table. He stopped in front of her, and he was so much taller than she had realized, standing up. He held out his hand. I'd like you to come with me, he said. Right now. There's a wire transfer that's already gone out, and we have until midnight to stop it, and I don't speak Mandarin, and the bank in Shanghai will not take a call from anyone who doesn't. She looked at his hand. She looked at the door, where the three men had just disappeared. She looked at Vincent Marsh, slumped in his chair, the gold watch heavy on his wrist. Outside, in the rain, somewhere in Manhattan, a clock was ticking toward midnight, and $10 million was racing across an ocean toward a bank that would not, by morning, exist. Elena Marlowe took off her apron. She placed it on the table. She put her hand in Adrian Cross's hand, and she stood up. I'll come with you, she said. And the rain kept falling, and the chandeliers kept burning, and somewhere across the city, a 5-year-old girl was sleeping with her arm around a stuffed rabbit, not knowing that the woman who had just saved her future was a stranger she would not meet for 3 more days. The car was a black Mercedes with leather seats that smelled like money and anxiety. Adrian sat in the back beside Elena, his phone already pressed to his ear, barking instructions at someone named Rachel, who was apparently his assistant, and who was apparently still awake at 9:30 on a Tuesday night. Rachel, listen to me. I need you to conference in David Kim from legal. Now. Not tomorrow. Now. And I need the wire confirmation from this afternoon's transfer to Pacific Rim. The 10 million. Yes, that one. Send it to my phone in the next 3 minutes or you're fired. He hung up without saying goodbye. Elena sat very still, her hands folded in her lap. She had left the Meridian without clocking out, without telling Margot, without getting her coat. Her black server's vest was still on, and underneath it her white shirt was damp at the collar from nerves she couldn't name. Through the rain-streaked window, the city slid past in blurs of light and shadow. Where are we going? She asked. My office. 57th and Lex. Adrian didn't look at her. He was scrolling through his phone with the focused intensity of a man defusing a bomb. You have a passport? What? A passport. Valid. Do you have one? Yes. Why? Because if we can't stop this wire by midnight, we're flying to Shanghai in the morning, and you're coming with me. Elena's stomach dropped. Mr. Cross, I have a job. You had a job. At a restaurant. Pouring wine for men who didn't see you. He looked at her then, and his gray eyes were not unkind, but they were not soft either. You just saved my company, Elena. That makes you valuable. Valuable people don't pour wine. I didn't do it to be valuable. I know. He went back to his phone. That's why I believe you. The driver, a silent man with a shaved head and a scar along his jaw, took a corner too fast and Elena's shoulder hit the door. She steadied herself. Her heart was doing something strange in her chest, something arrhythmic and wild. Mr. Cross, she said, what happened back there? With Mr. Marsh. What's going to happen to him? Adrian's jaw tightened. Vincent Marsh has been my CFO for 6 years. He was at my wedding. He held my daughter when she was born. He paused. And he just tried to destroy everything I've built so he could retire to Geneva with $30 million in blood money. You're going to have him arrested. I'm going to have him dismantled. Adrian's voice was flat. By morning, every bank he's ever used will freeze his accounts. Every board he sits on will have his resignation. And yes, Elena, he will be arrested. The FBI has a very competent financial crimes division. Elena thought of Vincent Marsh's face when she had spoken, the way the blood had drained from it, the way his hands had started to shake. He looked scared, she said. He should be. I've never done that before, scared someone like that. Adrian glanced at her. How does it feel? She considered the question. Outside, the rain was falling harder now, drumming against the roof of the car. Strange, she said, like I broke something I didn't know I was allowed to touch. You didn't break it. Marsh broke it. You just pointed at the pieces. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, frowned, and then turned it toward her. This is the wire confirmation. Can you read it? The document was dense with numbers and codes and bank routing information, but at the top, in clean black text, was a line in Mandarin. Shou Quan Ren Cha, Taiping Yang Wuliu Kong Gu Youxian Gong Si. Elena read aloud. Recipient: Pacific Rim Logistics Holdings, Ltd. Shanghai Pudong Fajian Yinhang. Shanghai Pudong Development Bank. What else? She scanned the page. Her father had taught her to read financial documents when she was 14, drilling her on vocabulary she didn't understand at the time. Revenue, assets, liabilities. He had wanted her to be ready for a world that would not make space for her unless she carved it out herself. The receiving account is in Shanghai, she said. The transfer was initiated at 4:15 this afternoon, 10 million US dollars. It's marked as an acquisition deposit, non-refundable. Non-refundable. Adrian's laugh was cold. Of course it is. Mr. Cross. Adrian, if we're going to spend the next 3 hours on the phone with a Chinese bank, you should probably use my first name. Adrian. The name felt odd in her mouth. Too familiar. Too close. What happens if we can't stop it? The wire. He was quiet for a moment. The car turned onto Lexington and the towers of Midtown rose around them like glass cliffs. If we can't stop it, he said, then Cross Holdings loses $10 million we don't have in liquid capital right now, which means I'll have to pull from the operating budget, which means I'll have to delay the expansion in Ohio, which means 200 people don't get hired next quarter, which means their families don't get health insurance, which means... He stopped. It's dominoes, Elena. That's how these things work. You knock one over, and the rest follow. And your daughter? His face changed. Just slightly. Just enough. Sophie's trust fund is separate, untouchable. Even if Cross Holdings went under tomorrow, she'd be fine. Financially. He looked out the window. But she'd grow up knowing her father lost everything her grandfather built. She'd grow up knowing I was the one who trusted the wrong people. That's not a small thing. Elena thought of the soft-voiced man at the table, and the little girl. She'll lose everything. They knew about her, she said. Who? The men. At the restaurant. They talked about her. They knew you had a daughter. They knew she was 5. Adrian's hand closed into a fist against his knee. These people do their research, he said. That's how they work. They find the pressure point, the thing you care about more than the money, and then they press. What's your pressure point? He looked at her. You just said it. The car stopped. They were in front of a tower of black glass and steel, 60 stories high, with the Cross Holdings logo etched into the granite above the entrance. The rain was a curtain now, and through it Elena could see a doorman in a long coat waiting with an umbrella. Come on, Adrian said. They ran. Inside, the lobby was all white marble and recessed lighting, empty except for a security guard at the desk who nodded at Adrian and didn't ask questions. The elevator was glass-walled, and as they rose, the city spread out below them, a glittering grid of ambition and ruin. Elena's ears popped. She swallowed. I've never been this high up before, she said. Adrian was watching the floor numbers tick upward. You're from New York? Queens, Astoria. Rent or own? Rent, a studio, above a laundromat. Family? A sister, in Buffalo. Parents? My father died 6 years ago. Cancer. My mother's in a nursing home in Greenpoint, early onset dementia. She didn't know why she was telling him this. The words were just coming out, like water from a cracked pipe. She doesn't remember me most days. I visit on Sundays and she calls me by her sister's name. The elevator doors opened. They stepped out into a hallway that smelled like new carpet and old money. Adrian led her past a reception desk, through a set of frosted glass doors, and into an office that was larger than Elena's entire apartment. The wall behind the desk was all windows. The view was the city, spread out like a promise or a threat, depending on how you looked at it. The desk itself was black walnut, clean except for a computer monitor and a framed photograph of a little girl with dark curls and her father's gray eyes, holding a stuffed rabbit and laughing. That's Sophie, Adrian said, following Elena's gaze. She's beautiful. She's stubborn, like her mother. He crossed to the desk and tapped the computer awake. Sit. There. He pointed to a leather chair across from him. And tell me everything you remember from that room. Every word. In order. Elena sat. She closed her eyes. She went back. It took 20 minutes. Adrian typed while she spoke, his fingers fast and precise on the keyboard, and he did not interrupt her except to ask for clarification on a name or a phrase. When she was done, the document on his screen was 2 pages long, single-spaced, a transcript of treason in 2 languages. "This is enough," he said quietly. "More than enough." "For what?" "For the FBI, for the lawsuit, for destroying every piece of credibility those men have ever had." He saved the file. "But first we stop the wire." He picked up his desk phone and dialed a number from memory. It rang 4 times before someone answered, a man's voice, groggy and irritated. "Adrian, it's 10 at night. David, I need you to conference in Huang Wei Min at Shanghai Pudong Development Bank. Now." "Huang Wei, Adrian, do you have any idea what time it is in Shanghai?" 11 in the morning. He'll be in his office. Call him." There was a pause. Elena could hear the other man, David, breathing on the line. "What happened?" David asked. "Vincent Marsh just tried to sell my company to a shell corporation for $200 million. We wired them $10 million this afternoon as a deposit. I need it back." "Jesus Christ." "David, focus. Call Huang. Tell him it's urgent. Tell him I have documentation that the receiving account is fraudulent, and that if he doesn't freeze the transfer, I will personally ensure that Shanghai Pudong Development Bank is never used by another American firm again." "Adrian, you can't just—" "I can, and I will. Make the call." The line went dead. Adrian set the phone down and looked at Elena. "Huang Weimin is the director of international transfers at the bank. He's also the cousin of a business partner I worked with in 2019. He owes me a favor." He leaned back in his chair. "But he won't take my call. He'll take David's call because David is a lawyer and lawyers scare bankers. And then David will put me on the line, and I will ask Huang very politely to freeze the transfer, and Huang will say no, because freezing an international wire transfer 48 hours after it's been initiated is a bureaucratic nightmare that could cost him his job. So why are we calling him?" "Because you're going to convince him." Elena stared at him. "I'm going to— What?" "You speak Mandarin. Fluently. Better than fluently. You speak it like someone who grew up with it." He leaned forward. "Huang Weimin is 63 years old. He's from Hangzhou. He's old school. He respects tradition, hierarchy. And he does not respect Americans who bark at him in English and expect him to roll over. So you want me to speak to him in Mandarin, to explain the situation, to tell him that the account is fraudulent, that the transfer was made under false pretenses, and that if he does not freeze it, Cross Holdings will pursue legal action against Shanghai Pudong Development Bank for facilitating wire fraud." Elena's mouth went dry. "I'm a waitress." "You were a waitress?" 2 hours ago." His gray eyes were steady on hers. "What are you now?" She didn't have an answer. The phone rang. Adrian put it on speaker. "Adrian, it's David. I have Huang on the line." A new voice came through, clipped and formal, speaking English with a heavy accent. "Mr. Cross, this is highly irregular. I was informed you wish to discuss a wire transfer. Mr. Huang, thank you for taking the call." Adrian's voice had shifted. It was smoother now, careful. "I apologize for the inconvenience. I'm calling about a transfer that was initiated from Cross Holdings to an account at your institution yesterday afternoon. $10 million US. The recipient is listed as Pacific Rim Logistics Holdings." There was a pause. "I will need to verify this information," Huang said. "What is the transaction reference number?" Adrian rattled off a 16-digit code. Elena heard the sound of typing on the other end of the line. "Yes," Huang said. "I have the record. The transfer was completed this morning at 9:43 a.m. Shanghai time. The funds have been received by the account holder. Mr. Huang, I need you to freeze that account and reverse the transfer." "Mr. Cross, that is not possible. The transfer has been completed. The funds were transferred under fraudulent pretenses. The account holder is not a legitimate business entity. I have documentation proving that Pacific Rim Logistics is a shell corporation designed to facilitate financial fraud." Huang's voice became very cold. "Mr. Cross, Shanghai Pudong Development Bank conducts thorough due diligence on all corporate accounts. I can assure you that Pacific Rim Logistics has provided all necessary documentation, and the documentation is fake. Mr. Cross, I have a witness who overheard the principals of Pacific Rim Logistics discussing, in Mandarin, the fact that the company does not exist, that the acquisition was a trap, that my CFO was bribed to push the deal through, and that the $10 million currently sitting in that account was meant to be the first domino in a scheme that would bankrupt Cross Holdings within 6 months. There was a very long silence. Mr. Cross, Huang said slowly, these are serious accusations. I'm aware. Do you have evidence? I have a sworn statement from the witness. I have a recording of the conversation. And I have a very expensive legal team that will bury your bank in lawsuits if you do not freeze that account in the next 10 minutes. Elena's eyes widened. They did not have a recording. Adrian had not recorded anything. Adrian looked at her and mouthed, "Trust me." "Mr. Cross," Huang said, "even if what you are saying is true, I cannot simply freeze an account based on a phone call. There are procedures, regulations. I would need to see the evidence. I would need to consult with my superiors. This could take days." "We don't have days. We have until midnight." "Mr. Cross, I sympathize, but..." "Mr. Huang?" Adrian's voice dropped. "In 2019, your cousin, Huang Li Wen, had a shipping container full of medical equipment stuck in customs in Los Angeles for 3 weeks. The shipment was worth $8 million. It was going to spoil. Your cousin called me personally and asked for help. I made 2 phone calls. The container was released in 48 hours. Huang said nothing. "I did not ask your cousin for money," Adrian continued. "I did not ask for favors. I helped him because it was the right thing to do. And now I am asking you, Mr. Huang, to help me, because it is the right thing to do." The silence stretched out. "Mr. Cross," Huang said finally, "I cannot freeze the account based on your word alone. But if you have a Mandarin-speaking witness who can verify the details of this alleged conversation, I would be willing to hear them." Adrian looked at Elena. She stood up. Her legs felt unsteady. She walked to the desk. She leaned over the phone. "Mr. Huang," she said in Mandarin, "Wo Xing Ma, Ming Mei Lin, Wo Shi Zheng Ren. My surname is Ma. My given name is Mei Lin. I am the witness." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Ni de zhong wen." "Your Mandarin." "Wo fuqin shi Zhejiang ren," Elena said. "My father was from Zhejiang. 他教了我从小到大. He taught me from childhood." 今天晚上，在纽约的一家餐厅，我听到3个男人在讨论太平洋物流公司。他们用中文说话，因为他们以为没有人能听懂。Tonight, in a New York restaurant, I overheard 3 men discussing Pacific Rim Logistics. They spoke in Chinese because they believed no one could understand. 你听到了什么? Huang's voice was careful now. What did you hear? 他们说公司不存在，只是一个空壳，用来欺骗 Adrian Cross 先生。他们说 Cross 先生的财务总监已经收到了3000万美元的贿赂，存在瑞士银行。他们说合同签了以后 Cross 控股公司会在6个月内破产。They said the company doesn't exist, that it's just a shell designed to deceive Mr. Cross. They said Mr. Cross's CFO had already received a $30 million bribe in a Swiss bank. They said that once the contract was signed, Cross Holdings would be bankrupt within 6 months. She could hear Huang breathing. 这是很严重的指控, he said. These are very serious accusations. 我知道，但是都是真的。I know, but they are true. 而且那笔1000万美元的电汇，那是现金的第一部分。如果你不冻结账户 ，Cross 先生会失去一切。他的公司，他的员工，他女儿的未来。And that $10 million wire transfer, it's the first part of the trap. If you don't freeze the account, Mr. Cross will lose everything, his company, his employees, his daughter's future. There was a long pause. 你说你父亲是浙江人, Huang said. You said your father was from Zhejiang. 对，从一个靠近杭州的小村子。Yes, from a small village near Hangzhou. 我也是杭州人. I am also from Hangzhou. Elena's throat tightened. She had not expected this. 那我们是老乡, she said. Then we are from the same home. Do we? Huang said quietly. Yes. Lao xiang bu pian lao xiang. People from the same home do not deceive each other. Wo meyo pian ni, Elena said. I am not deceiving you. Wo fa shi. I swear it. Another pause, longer this time. Miss Ma, Huang said, switching back to English. I will need to verify this information, but I'm willing to place a temporary hold on the account while I investigate. 48 hours, no more. Adrian closed his eyes. Relief broke across his face like a wave. Mr. Huang, he said. Thank you. Do not thank me yet, Mr. Cross. If your witness is lying, if this is some elaborate scheme to defraud my bank, I will personally ensure that you never conduct business in China again. She's not lying. We will see. There was the sound of typing again. The hold is in place. You have 48 hours to provide documentation supporting your claim. After that, the funds will be released to Pacific Rim Logistics, and this matter will be closed. Understood. And Mr. Cross? Yes? Your witness. Miss Ma. She speaks like someone from my province. Tell her she has done a good thing tonight. The line went dead. Adrian sat back in his chair. He ran a hand through his hair. He looked, for the first time since Elena had met him, like a man who had just realized he was still alive. 48 hours, he said. Is that enough time? It has to be. He looked at her. You were incredible. Elena shook her head. I just told him the truth. You did more than that. You made him trust you. In 3 minutes. In a language most Americans can't even pronounce. He stood up. He walked around the desk. He stopped in front of her, and he held out his hand again, the way he had in the restaurant. Elena Marlowe, he said, I would like to offer you a job. She stared at him. A job. Head of Special Operations, salary of $250,000 a year, plus benefits, plus a signing bonus of $50,000. He kept his hand extended. You'd be working directly with me. International negotiations, due diligence, fraud prevention. And yes, before you ask, it's a real position. I was planning to hire someone next quarter anyway. You just moved up the timeline. Elena's head was spinning. Mr. Cross. Adrian, I'm not qualified for that. I don't have a degree in business. I don't have any experience in... You have something better than experience. You have instinct, and you have courage. His gray eyes were steady. Most people in that restaurant tonight would have kept their mouths shut. They would have poured the wine, collected their tips, and gone home. You didn't. You spoke up, even though it could have cost you everything. I didn't do it for a job. I know. That's exactly why I'm offering you one. She looked at his hand. She looked at his face. She thought about her studio apartment above the laundromat, where the heat didn't work and the neighbors fought at 2 a.m, and the rent was still $800 a month because that's what you paid to survive in Queens. She thought about her mother in the nursing home who didn't remember her name. She thought about her sister in Buffalo, whose medical bills were piling up like snow. She thought about her father, who had wanted her to be ready for a world that would not make space for her unless she carved it out herself. Okay, she said. She put her hand in his. Okay? He smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him. That's it? Just okay? What else do you want me to say? I don't know. Most people negotiate. I'm not most people. No, Adrian said. You're really not. He let go of her hand. He crossed to a small bar cart in the corner of the office and poured 2 glasses of whiskey, neat, and handed one to her. To new beginnings, he said. Elena lifted her glass. To not getting fired. They drank. The whiskey burned going down, and Elena coughed, and Adrian laughed. And for a moment the office felt less like a place where empires were built, and more like a room where 2 people who had almost drowned were learning to breathe again. So what happens now? Elena asked. Now, Adrian said, we go to war. He set down his glass, he pulled out his phone, he made a call. Rachel, it's me. I need you to pull every piece of documentation we have on Vincent Marsh. Bank statements, emails, meeting notes, expense reports, everything. And I need you to get me the FBI's financial crimes hotline. Yes, tonight. I don't care if it's late. This is a felony, Rachel. Multiple felonies. He paused. And one more thing. I need you to draft a severance agreement for Marsh, termination for cause, 0 payout. I want him to know exactly how much he's losing. He hung up. He looked at Elena. You should go home. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day.
What about you? I don't sleep much. He gestured to the windows, the city, the night. Too much to do. Elena stood. She set down her glass. She walked to the door, and then she stopped. Adrian. Yeah? Those men at the restaurant, the ones who tried to destroy you, they're not going to just disappear, are they? He was quiet for a moment. No, he said. They're not. What are they going to do? They're going to come after me, and after you, because you're the witness. You're the one who can prove what they said, and men like that don't leave witnesses standing. Elena's stomach turned cold. Are you trying to scare me?
I'm trying to be honest with you. He crossed his arms. If you take this job, Elena, you're stepping into a world where the stakes are higher than you've ever dealt with, where people will smile at you over dinner and then destroy you before breakfast, where trust is a commodity and loyalty is bought and sold. He paused. I can protect you. I will protect you, but I need you to understand what you're signing up for. She looked at him. I already signed up, she said. The moment I opened my mouth. He nodded slowly. Yeah, you did. She left. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up. The lobby was still empty except for the security guard, who nodded at her the same way he had nodded at Adrian, as if she belonged here now, as if she was someone. Outside, the rain had stopped. The streets were black and slick, reflecting the lights of the city in fractured gold. Elena stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, breathing in the smell of wet pavement and exhaust, and she thought about what had just happened. The restaurant, the men, the wire, the phone call, the job offer. $250,000 a year. She had never had $250 in her savings account at the same time. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Adrian. I'm sending a car to take you home. It'll be there in 5 minutes. Don't argue. She almost smiled. The car arrived. It was the same black Mercedes, the same silent driver. Elena climbed in, and they drove through the empty streets of Manhattan, past the late-night diners and the closed storefronts and the people who lived in the margins of the city, invisible and necessary. When they reached her building in Astoria, the driver got out and opened her door, and Elena realized with a strange jolt that no one had ever opened a car door for her before. Thank you, she said. The driver nodded. He had kind eyes, she noticed. A small scar along his jaw, but kind eyes. She climbed the stairs to her apartment. The hallway smelled like detergent and frying oil. She unlocked the door. She stepped inside. The apartment was exactly as she had left it. One room, a futon that doubled as a couch, a kitchenette with 2 burners and a microwave that only worked on the left side, a bathroom with tiles that had been white once, a long time ago. The window looked out onto the alley behind the laundromat, where the dumpsters lived. Elena stood in the middle of the room, still wearing her server's vest, and she thought, this is the last night I will spend here. She didn't know how she knew, but she knew. She took off the vest. She folded it carefully, the way her father had taught her to fold things, with respect, because even small things deserved care. She set it on the futon. She walked to the window. She looked out at the alley, at the dumpsters, at the fire escape that she had never used and probably never would. And then she sat down at the tiny desk in the corner, and she pulled out a piece of paper and she wrote a letter to her sister in Buffalo. Dear Claire, something happened tonight. I can't explain it all yet, but I think things are going to change for both of us. I'm going to send you money next week, enough to cover the medical bills, enough to cover rent, enough so you don't have to choose between eating and paying for treatment. I know you're going to argue. You're going to say you don't need it. You're going to say I should save it for myself. But I'm asking you not to argue, just this once. Let me help you. I love you. Dad would have been proud of us tonight, I think. Elena. She folded the letter. She put it in an envelope. She would mail it tomorrow. She lay down on the futon. She closed her eyes. And in the dark, in the quiet, she heard her father's voice, the way she sometimes did when the world was too loud and she needed to remember who she was. Mei Lin, he said. Beautiful jade. You are stronger than you know. She fell asleep like that, still in her work clothes, still holding the memory of her father's voice like a candle in a very dark room. And across the city, in his office on the 57th floor, Adrian Cross sat at his desk and stared at the photograph of his daughter, and he thought about the woman who had saved them both, and he wondered if he had just made the best decision of his life or the most dangerous. Only time would tell.
Elena woke to her phone ringing at 6 in the morning. She fumbled for it on the floor beside the futon, her eyes still half closed, and saw Adrian's name on the screen. Hello? Get dressed. Business casual. The car will be there in 40 minutes. She sat up, her head foggy. What's happening?
Vincent Marsh just tried to withdraw $4 million from his personal account. The bank flagged it and called me. He's running. Adrian's voice was clipped, moving fast. The FBI wants to talk to both of us, today, and I need you there when they do. Adrian, I don't know anything about. You know everything that matters. You're the witness. Without you, this is just my word against his. He paused. Can you do this? Elena looked around her apartment. The morning light was coming through the window in gray slants, touching the folded server's vest on the futon, the letter to her sister on the desk, the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of somewhere she'd never been. Yeah, she said. I can do this. Good. Wear something that makes you look competent, not intimidating. Competent. I don't own anything intimidating. Even better. He hung up. Elena stood in front of her closet for 5 minutes. She owned 4 outfits that could be called business casual if you were generous with the definition. A gray pencil skirt her sister had given her 3 years ago. A white button-down with a small coffee stain near the 3rd button that she had never been able to get out. A black blazer from a thrift store in Park Slope that was slightly too big in the shoulders. She put them all on, looked at herself in the mirror, and felt like a child playing dress-up. The coffee stain was visible if you knew where to look. She changed shirts. This one was cream-colored, no stains, but it made her skin look washed out. She changed back. She covered the coffee stain with the blazer. She pulled her hair back into the same severe bun she wore at the restaurant, and then she stopped, her hands still in her hair, and thought, I don't work at the restaurant anymore. She let her hair down. She braided it, instead, loose, over one shoulder. It made her look younger, softer. She didn't know if that was better or worse. The car arrived at 6:43, the same driver, the same black Mercedes. He didn't speak, but he held the door, and Elena climbed in with her purse clutched in both hands like a shield. They drove into Manhattan through traffic that was already thickening, the morning commute building like a slow flood. Elena watched the city pass outside the window and tried not to think about what she was about to do. She had never spoken to the FBI before. She had never spoken to any kind of law enforcement, actually, except for the time she'd been pulled over for a broken taillight, and the officer had let her go with a warning because she'd cried. She was not going to cry today. The car pulled up in front of the Cross Holdings building. Adrian was waiting outside, talking on his phone, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than Elena's entire wardrobe. When he saw her, he ended the call and walked over. You look good, he said. I look like someone pretending to have a real job. That's what having a real job is. Pretending until it's not pretending anymore. He opened the car door. Come on. They're waiting upstairs. They rode the elevator in silence. Adrian was scrolling through his phone with the focused intensity of a man who had not slept and did not plan to. Elena counted the floors as they climbed. 20, 30, 40. At 57, the doors opened. The conference room was on the north side of the building, all glass and steel and a table long enough to seat 20 people. Only 4 chairs were occupied. Adrian's lawyer, David Kim, a thin man in his 40s with wire-rimmed glasses and a wedding ring he kept twisting around his finger, and 2 FBI agents. The first agent was a woman in her 50s, African-American, with short natural hair and eyes that looked like they had seen every lie ever told and were tired of all of them. Her name was Agent Carol Reeves, and she introduced herself with a handshake that was firm but not aggressive. The second agent was younger, maybe 35, white, with the kind of bland handsomeness that made him instantly forgettable. His name was Agent Patrick Donnelly, and he smiled when he shook Elena's hand, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Miss Marlowe, Reeves said, thank you for coming in on such short notice. Of course. Elena sat down in the chair Adrian pulled out for her. Her hands were shaking. She folded them in her lap. We've been briefed on the situation by Mr. Cross and Mr. Kim, Reeves continued, but we'd like to hear your account directly. In your own words, starting with last night at the Meridian Room. Elena glanced at Adrian. He nodded. She told them everything. The dinner, the 3 men, The conversation in Mandarin, the shell company, the offshore debt, the $30 million, the plans to bankrupt Cross Holdings, Vincent Marsh's involvement, the wire transfer, the phone call to Shanghai. She spoke slowly, carefully, and she did not embellish. Her father had taught her that the truth was enough. You didn't need to dress it up. Reeves took notes on a yellow legal pad. Donnelly watched Elena with the kind of attention that felt like an autopsy. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. "Miss Marlowe," Donnelly said, "how well do you speak Mandarin? Fluently?" "Where did you learn?" "From my father. He was a native speaker." "And you're certain you understood the conversation correctly? There's no chance you misheard or misinterpreted?" Elena felt something tighten in her chest. "I'm certain. Because Mandarin is a tonal language," Donnelly continued. "Very easy to mishear, especially in a noisy restaurant. The room was soundproofed. It wasn't noisy. Still, you were working. You were distracted, pouring wine, taking orders. I know what I heard." Her voice was sharper now. She hadn't meant for it to be sharp, but it was. Reeves held up a hand. "Agent Donnelly is just doing his job, Miss Marlowe. We have to ask these questions. Defense attorneys will ask them too, if this goes to trial." "If?" Adrian said. "There's no if. Vincent Marsh committed wire fraud. He accepted a bribe. He conspired to defraud Cross Holdings of $200 million. The evidence is—" "The evidence," Reeves interrupted gently, "is a verbal account from a witness who overheard a conversation in a foreign language. That's not nothing, Mr. Cross, but it's also not a smoking gun." "What about the wire transfer?" David Kim leaned forward. $10 million to a fraudulent account. That's documentary evidence. "It's evidence of a wire transfer," Donnelly said. "It's not evidence of fraud unless we can prove the account is fraudulent. And right now all we have is Miss Marlowe's testimony that she heard 3 men say the company doesn't exist." "The company doesn't exist," Elena said. "I can prove it." Everyone turned to look at her. "How?" Reeves asked. Elena pulled out her phone. Her hands were still shaking, but her voice was steady. "Last night, after I got home, I couldn't sleep. So I looked up Pacific Rim Logistics Holdings, their website, their registration documents, everything I could find." She opened her phone and pulled up a series of screenshots. The website was created 3 months ago. The domain registration is hidden behind a proxy service in Panama. The business address listed on their incorporation papers is a mailbox rental facility in Hong Kong, and the CEO's name, she handed her phone to Reeves, doesn't exist. I ran it through every database I could access. No LinkedIn, no social media, no previous business filings, nothing. Reeves studied the screen. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted. "Where did you learn to do this?" she asked. "Google," Elena said, "and my father. He used to say that in America, everything is written down somewhere. You just have to know where to look." Donnelly took the phone from Reeves. He scrolled through the screenshots, his jaw tight. "This is good work, Miss Marlowe," he said, and for the first time, the smile in his eyes looked real. Adrian was staring at Elena like he'd never seen her before. "You did this last night?" he said. "I couldn't sleep." "You just researched an entire shell corporation in your apartment in Queens. It's not hard if you know what to look for." Reeves set down her pen. "Miss Marlowe, would you be willing to testify to all of this? In front of a grand jury and potentially at trial?" Elena's throat went dry. "Yes. It won't be easy. Defense counsel will come at you hard. They'll question your credibility, your memory, your motives. They'll try to make you look like you're lying or confused or trying to get something from Mr. Cross." "I'm not lying." "I know, but you'll have to prove it, over and over." Reeves leaned back in her chair. "And there's another issue. The men you overheard at the restaurant. If they find out you're cooperating with the FBI, you could be in danger." "I'm already in danger," Elena said. "They know I was in that room. They know I speak Mandarin. They're not stupid." "No," Reeves said quietly. "They're not." Adrian stood up. "I'll hire private security for her. 24-hour protection, whatever she needs." "Mr. Cross, it's not negotiable." His voice was steel. "Elena is a witness because of me. Because she worked at a restaurant I chose for a meeting I scheduled. If anything happens to her, it's on me. Reeves looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Elena. "What do you want, Miss Marlowe?" It was a strange question. Elena had spent most of her life being told what to do, where to go, how to behave. No one had ever asked her what she wanted. "I want Vincent Marsh to answer for what he did," she said. "And I want those men, the ones who tried to destroy Mr. Cross's company. I want them to know they can't just walk into a room and ruin people's lives because they think no one is listening." Reeves smiled. It was a small smile, but it was genuine. "Then we'll make sure they know." The meeting lasted another hour. Reeves and Donnelly asked more questions, took more notes, recorded Elena's statement on a digital recorder that sat in the middle of the table like a small black witness. By the time they finished, it was almost noon and Elena's head was pounding. Adrian walked the agents to the elevator. David Kim stayed behind, gathering papers into his briefcase. "You did well," he said to Elena. "I didn't do anything. I just told them what happened." "That's more than most people can manage." He snapped his briefcase shut. "Telling the truth sounds simple. It's not, especially when the truth makes powerful people look bad." "Do you think they'll arrest him, Marsh?" "Eventually. They'll want to build the case first, gather more evidence. But yes, he's not walking away from this." David looked at her. "You should be careful, Miss Marlowe. Marsh has friends, people who owe him favors, and people like that don't always wait for the justice system to play out." "Are you trying to scare me?" "I'm trying to prepare you." He picked up his briefcase. "There's a difference." He left. Elena sat alone in the conference room, staring at the long table, the empty chairs, the windows that looked out over Manhattan like a kingdom built on sand. Adrian came back 15 minutes later carrying 2 paper cups of coffee and a bag from a deli down the street. "Eat," he said, setting the bag in front of her. "You look like you're going to pass out." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You've been up since 6, you haven't eaten anything, and you just spent 2 hours being interrogated by the FBI. He sat down across from her. "Eat." She opened the bag. Inside was a turkey sandwich on rye, a bag of chips, and a chocolate chip cookie wrapped in plastic. It was the kind of lunch her father used to pack for her when she was in middle school. She ate the sandwich. It tasted like cardboard, but she ate it anyway. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For the security. For believing me. For—" She gestured vaguely at the room, the city, the wreckage of the last 12 hours. "All of this." Adrian shook his head. "You don't thank someone for doing the bare minimum, Elena." "It's not the bare minimum. Most people would have let you twist in the wind." He leaned forward. "I'm not most people, and neither are you. So let's stop pretending we owe each other gratitude for basic decency." She looked at him. His gray eyes were tired. There were shadows under them that hadn't been there yesterday. "Did you sleep at all last night?" she asked. "No." "Adrian, I can't." He ran a hand through his hair. "Every time I close my eyes, I see that contract. I see myself signing it. I see Sophie growing up in a world where I lost everything because I was too arrogant to notice the knife at my back." He paused. "You stopped that, Elena. You stopped it. Do you understand what that means?" "I understand that I got lucky. I happened to be in the right place at the right time. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. You spent your whole life preparing for that moment, learning Mandarin, learning to be invisible, learning to listen, and when the opportunity came, you didn't freeze, you acted." He leaned back. "That's not luck. That's courage." Elena didn't know what to say to that. She ate a chip. It was too salty. Adrian's phone rang. He looked at the screen and his expression darkened. "It's Rachel. I have to take this." He stood up. "Stay here. Don't leave the building. I'll be back in 10 minutes. He walked out. Elena sat in the conference room and ate her cookie and looked out at the city and tried to make sense of the last 24 hours. Yesterday at this time, she had been folding napkins at the Meridian, invisible and safe. Now she was sitting in a billionaire's office, eating a cookie, waiting to find out if the men who wanted to destroy him were going to come after her too. It was absurd. All of it. She pulled out her phone and called her sister. Claire answered on the 3rd ring. "Elena, it's the middle of the day. Aren't you at work?" "I quit." There was a pause. "You what?" "I quit the restaurant. I have a new job." "Doing what?" "It's complicated." "Elena." Claire's voice shifted.
She sounded worried now. What's going on? I can't explain it all over the phone, but I'm okay. I promise. And I'm sending you money for the medical bills. Elena, no. We talked about this. You don't have... I do have it. I will have it. Next week. Enough to cover everything. She paused. Please don't argue with me, Claire. Just let me help you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Are you in trouble? Claire asked quietly. No? Are you lying to me? Elena closed her eyes. A little. Elena, I'm okay. I swear. Something happened. Something big. And I need you to trust me. Another pause. Okay, Claire said. I trust you. But if you end up in jail, I'm not bailing you out. Deal. They hung up. Elena set down her phone and stared at it for a long time, and she thought about trust and how fragile it was and how easy it was to break. Adrian came back 20 minutes later. His face was pale. What happened? Elena asked. Vincent Marsh is gone. What do you mean, gone? He left his apartment this morning at 7, packed a suitcase, got in a cab. The FBI had a surveillance team on him, but he gave them the slip somewhere in Midtown. They lost him near Grand Central. Adrian sat down heavily. He's running. Elena's stomach dropped. Where would he go? I don't know. Somewhere without an extradition treaty, probably. The Cayman Islands, Dubai, maybe back to Switzerland. He rubbed his face. The FBI put out a BOLO, Border Patrol, airports, train stations. But if he's smart, and he is, he's already gone. What about the money, the 30 million? Frozen. The Swiss government cooperated. But Marsh is smart enough to have moved it by now. Offshore accounts, shell companies, crypto. He's had this plan for months, Elena. Maybe longer. She thought about Vincent Marsh at the table last night. The delayed smile, the gold watch, the way he had looked at her when she spoke, like she was a problem he hadn't anticipated. He knew, she said, last night, when I exposed him. He knew exactly what he was going to do. Probably. Adrian's jaw tightened, which means he's been preparing for this, which means he's dangerous. More dangerous than the men from the restaurant. Different kind of dangerous. Those men will send lawyers. Marsh will send... He stopped. I don't know what he'll send, but I'm not taking chances. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Marcus, it's Adrian. I need a full security detail for Elena Marlowe. Yes, the witness, 24/7, 2 men, rotating shifts. I want background checks, I want NDAs, and I want them armed. He listened. I don't care what it costs. Have them at her apartment by 5 p.m. today. He hung up. Adrian, that's not necessary. Yes, it is. His voice was flat. Marsh knows who you are. He knows where you work. And if he's running, that means he's scared. Scared people make bad decisions. I can take care of myself. I'm sure you can, but you shouldn't have to. He stood up. Come on. I need to show you something. He led her out of the conference room down the hallway to another office. This one was smaller, with a single window overlooking the street below. There was a desk, a computer, a filing cabinet, and a chair that looked like it cost more than Elena's futon. This is yours, Adrian said. Elena stared at him. Mine? Your office. As of today. Head of Special Operations, remember? He gestured around the room. I know it's not much, but it's a start. You can decorate it however you want. Bring in plants, pictures, whatever. She walked to the window. From here, she could see the street, the taxis, the people rushing past with their briefcases and their phones and their lives. She could see the whole city, and it didn't look like a kingdom built on sand anymore. It looked like a place where things could happen. Where they were happening. Right now. I don't know what to say, she said. You don't have to say anything. Adrian leaned against the doorframe. Just do the job. That's all I need. What is the job exactly? Right now? Help me find Vincent Marsh before he disappears completely. Help me prove Pacific Rim Logistics is a fraud. Help me make sure that every person who tried to destroy my company ends up in a cell. He paused. And after that? We'll figure it out. Elena turned to face him. You're putting a lot of faith in someone you met 12 hours ago. I'm putting faith in someone who saved my life 12 hours ago. There's a difference.
He pushed off the doorframe. Get settled. I'll have Rachel bring you a laptop and a phone. We've got work to do. He left.
Elena stood in her new office and looked around at the empty desk, the blank walls, the window that framed the city like a painting she hadn't earned yet. She thought about her father, who had died in a house in Queens with nothing to his name except a book of Tang Dynasty poetry, and a daughter who spoke 2 languages but belonged to neither. She thought about what he would say if he could see her now. Probably something about jade. How it's formed under pressure. How it's worthless until someone sees its value. She sat down at the desk. She ran her hand over the smooth surface. She opened the filing cabinet. It was empty. She would fill it. The afternoon passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls and learning the computer system that Cross Holdings used to track everything from shipping routes to employee birthdays. Rachel, Adrian's assistant, was a woman in her late 20s with red hair and the kind of efficiency that made Elena feel like she was moving through molasses. Rachel brought her a laptop, a phone, a stack of folders, and an employee handbook that was 300 pages long. You don't have to read all of it, Rachel said. Just the parts about NDAs and sexual harassment and don't steal office supplies. Got it. And Adrian wanted me to give you this. Rachel handed her a thick manila envelope. It's the documentation on Pacific Rim logistics, everything we have. He wants you to go through it tonight. See if you can find anything the lawyers missed. Elena opened the envelope. Inside were bank statements, incorporation papers, email chains, and what looked like a partially redacted contract written in both English and Mandarin. This is a lot, she said. Welcome to the big leagues. Rachel smiled. It was the first genuine smile Elena had seen from anyone all day. You need anything else, just call. My number's in your phone under Rachel, assistant to the man who never sleeps. She left. Elena spent the rest of the afternoon reading. She read contracts and emails and bank statements until her eyes burned and her head ached, and she had to stand up and walk around the office just to keep from falling asleep. But she kept reading, because somewhere in these pages was proof. Proof that Pacific Rim Logistics was a shell. Proof that Vincent Marsh had sold out his company for $30 million. Proof that the men in the restaurant had planned the whole thing down to the last detail. She found it at 6:30. It was buried in an email chain between Marsh and someone named Li Zhao, one of the 3 men from the restaurant. The email was dated 3 months ago. The subject line was Re-Acquisition Timeline. The body of the email was in English, carefully worded, almost legal in its precision. But at the bottom, there was a single line in Mandarin that had been left untranslated, probably because whoever had reviewed the documents didn't speak the language. 技术，这个美国人什么都不知道。我们按计划进行. Remember, the American knows nothing. We proceed as planned. Elena's hand started to shake. She screenshot the email. She printed it. She walked down the hallway to Adrian's office and knocked on the door. Come in. He was at his desk, tie loosened, shirt sleeves rolled up, looking at something on his computer screen. When he saw her face, he stood up. What is it? She handed him the printout. He read it. His expression didn't change, but his hands tightened on the paper. Where did you find this? In the Marsh correspondence folder. It was translated into English, but whoever did the translation missed the last line, or ignored it. The American knows nothing. Adrian set the paper down carefully. That's me. Yes. And we proceed as planned. That's the shell company, the wire transfer, the whole thing. Yes. He sat down. He stared at the paper for a long time. I trusted him, he said quietly. Vincent. I trusted him with everything, my company, my daughter's future. And he sold me out for $30 million. I'm sorry. Don't be. He looked up at her. You found the proof. That's what matters. That's what we needed. What do we do with it? We give it to the FBI, tonight. He picked up his phone. And then we find Vincent Marsh. And we make sure he never does this to anyone else. He made the call. Reeves answered on the second ring. Agent Reeves, it's Adrian Cross. I have something you need to see. They met at a coffee shop in Chelsea at 8 p.m. Reeves came alone. No Donnelly, no backup. She sat across from Adrian and Elena in a booth at the back and read the email 3 times before she spoke. This is good, she said. This is very good. Good enough for an arrest warrant? Adrian asked. Good enough to start drafting one.
We'll need to verify the email's authenticity, trace the IP addresses, confirm Li Jiao is who you say he is. She looked at Elena. Can you identify him, Li Jiao? If we put together a photo array? Yes. What about the other two men from the restaurant? I can identify all three of them.
Reeves nodded slowly. Then we have a case. Wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, possibly money laundering depending on where the 30 million went. Marsh is looking at 20 years minimum. When can you pick him up? Adrian asked. We can't. He's in the wind. Reeves folded her hands on the table. But we will find him. Men like Marsh always make a mistake. They get comfortable. They think they're safe. And then they use a credit card or call an old friend or log into an email account, and we have them. How long? Could be days. Could be weeks. She paused. Could be months. Adrian's jaw tightened. That's not good enough. It's the best we can do, Mr. Cross. They sat in silence. Outside the coffee shop, the city moved past in its endless rhythm. Cars. People. Lives being lived in fragments, pieced together like a mosaic that only made sense from a distance. What about the men from the restaurant? Elena asked. Li Jiao and the others. Can you arrest them? Not yet. They're foreign nationals. We'd need cooperation from the Chinese government, and that's complicated. Reeves sighed. But we can freeze their assets, ban them from entering the country, make their lives very difficult. It's not justice, but it's something. It's not enough, Elena said. Reeves looked at her. It never is, Miss Marlowe, but it's what we have. They left the coffee shop at 9. Adrian walked Elena to the car, the same black Mercedes, the same silent driver. You did good today, he said. I just read some emails. You found the smoking gun. That's not nothing. He paused. The security detail will be at your apartment by the time you get home. 2 men. Marcus vetted them personally. They'll keep you safe. I don't need... Elena. He looked at her, and his gray eyes were serious. Let me do this. Please. She nodded. She got in the car. She watched Adrian through the window as they pulled away. He stood on the sidewalk with his hands in his pockets, watching her go, and she thought, he's lonely. It was a strange thought. Adrian Cross had everything: money, power, a daughter who loved him, a company that employed thousands. But standing there in the fading light, he looked like the loneliest man in New York. When Elena got home, there were 2 men waiting outside her building. They introduced themselves as Tom and James. Tom was in his 40s, broad-shouldered, with a scar through his left eyebrow. James was younger, maybe 30, with dark skin and kind eyes and a gun holstered under his jacket. Miss Marlowe, Tom said, we'll be with you 24/7. One of us will be posted outside your apartment at all times. The other will be in a vehicle downstairs. If you need anything, just call. He handed her a business card with a phone number on it. Nothing else. Thank you, Elena said. Just doing our job, ma'am. She went upstairs. Tom followed. He checked her apartment, looked in the closet, tested the window locks, and then stationed himself in the hallway outside her door. Elena stood in the middle of her apartment and looked around at the futon, the kitchenette, the window that looked out onto the alley. It felt different now, smaller, like she had outgrown it in the space of a single day. She sat down at her desk. She opened her laptop. She went back to work. By midnight, she had read every document in the Pacific Rim file twice. She had cross-referenced names, traced money, built a timeline of the fraud that stretched back 6 months. And she had found something else, something that made her blood run cold. A transfer. Not the 10 million from yesterday. Another one, sent 3 weeks ago, $5 million. From Cross Holdings to an account in the Cayman Islands, authorized by Vincent Marsh, approved by Adrian Cross. Elena stared at the screen. Her hands were shaking again. Adrian had approved it, which meant either he had been careless, signing off on transfers without reading them, or he had known. And if he had known, no. She closed the laptop. She pressed her palms against her eyes. She made herself breathe. Adrian didn't know. He couldn't have known. He was the victim here. He was the one being defrauded. But the signature was his. She had seen it on enough documents today to recognize it. The sharp A, the crossed T, the flourish at the end that looked like a wave. She opened the laptop again. She pulled up the transfer authorization. She zoomed in on the signature. It was perfect. Too perfect. Forged. Elena let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding.
The signature was forged. Vincent Marsh had forged it. That's how he'd moved the money without Adrian knowing. That's how he'd set up the whole thing. She saved the document. She sent it to her phone. She would show Adrian tomorrow. She lay down on the futon. She closed her eyes. She tried to sleep. But every time she started to drift off, she saw Vincent Marsh's face, the delayed smile, the gold watch, the way he had looked at her when she spoke, like she was a problem he hadn't anticipated. And she wondered where he was now, what he was planning, whether he was scared or angry or already halfway to a beach somewhere, drinking expensive wine and laughing at the people he'd left behind. She wondered if he was thinking about her. She wondered if he was coming for her. Outside in the hallway, Tom shifted his weight. The floor creaked. Elena opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling and listened to the sound of a man with a gun standing between her and the rest of the world. And she thought, this is my life now. And she didn't know if that was a good thing or a terrible one. She didn't sleep. By 3 a.m, Elena gave up trying and made coffee in the tiny kitchenette, watching the steam rise in the blue glow of her laptop screen. The forged signature stared back at her from the document, Adrian's name written in someone else's hand, and she thought about how easy it was to steal someone's identity when you knew them well enough. Vincent Marsh had known Adrian for 6 years, had held his daughter, had stood beside him at board meetings and charity dinners, and probably a dozen other moments that made betrayal feel like a knife between the ribs instead of a bullet from across the room. Tom knocked softly at 4:30. "Miss Marlowe, you okay in there?" "I'm fine," she called back. "You've had the light on for 3 hours. I work better at night." There was a pause. "You need anything? Coffee? Food?" "I'm good. Thank you." She heard him settle back against the wall. The building was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional groan of old pipes. Elena closed her laptop and stood at the window, looking down at the alley where the dumpsters sat like sleeping animals. In 6 hours, the city would wake up. People would go to work. The world would keep turning. And she would walk into Cross Holdings as someone who belonged there, even though she still felt like an imposter wearing borrowed clothes. Her phone buzzed at 5:15, a text from Adrian. "Are you awake?" She typed back, "Yes. Can't sleep either. Meet me at the office at 6. I need to show you something." "Okay." She showered, dressed in the same gray skirt and cream blouse from yesterday, because they were the only professional clothes she owned that were clean. Tom was still in the hallway when she opened the door. "Morning," he said. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "James is bringing the car around. I can take the subway." "No, ma'am, you can't. Not anymore." She wanted to argue, but she was too tired. She followed him downstairs where James was waiting in the Mercedes with the engine running. The sky was still dark, that blue-black color that comes right before dawn, and the streets were empty except for a few garbage trucks and early-morning delivery vans. They drove into Manhattan in silence. Elena watched the city wake up through the window, the lights clicking on in apartment buildings, the first commuters stumbling toward subway stations with coffee cups and resignation on their faces. She thought about yesterday morning when she'd been one of them. Anonymous. Safe. Invisible. She wasn't invisible anymore. The Cross Holdings building was almost empty when they arrived. A cleaning crew was working in the lobby, and the security guard nodded at Elena like he'd seen her 100 times before. The elevator ride to the 57th floor felt longer than usual, and when the doors opened, she saw light spilling from Adrian's office at the end of the hall. He was at his desk, still wearing yesterday's shirt, though he'd lost the tie somewhere along the way. There were papers everywhere, coffee cups stacked like a small city skyline, and his eyes were red-rimmed and focused. "Elena." He stood when he saw her. "Come in. Close the door." She did. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Wrong? Nothing's wrong. I found him." Adrian turned his computer monitor toward her. On the screen was a grainy photograph of a man in sunglasses standing outside what looked like a hotel. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m., and the location stamp said Georgetown, Cayman Islands. "That's Vincent?" Elena leaned closer. "That's Vincent, taken 8 hours ago outside the Ritz-Carlton. He used a credit card registered to a shell company he set up 2 years ago. The FBI missed it in their initial sweep, but I didn't." Adrian's smile was sharp. "He got comfortable, just like Reeves said he would." "Have you told the FBI?" "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first." He sat back down, and for the first time since Elena had met him, he looked satisfied. Not happy exactly, but satisfied. They'll have him in custody by tomorrow, maybe sooner if they move fast. Elena pulled out her phone and showed him the forged signature she'd found. There's more. He moved $5 million 3 weeks ago, used your signature, forged it. Adrian studied the screen. His jaw tightened. How many other transfers did he authorize under my name? I don't know. I only found the one. Find the others. He handed the phone back. All of them. I want a complete accounting of every dollar Vincent Marsh stole from this company. Adrian, that could take days. Then take days. I need to know how deep this goes. He ran a hand through his hair. And I need the FBI to know. Because when this goes to trial, I want Vincent Marsh buried so deep he never sees daylight again. Elena nodded. She turned to leave. Wait. Adrian's voice stopped her. There's something else. She turned back. He was holding a folder. Not the manila envelope from yesterday. Something thinner, personal. I need you to meet Sophie, he said. Elena blinked. Your daughter? She's been asking about you. Rachel told her nanny that I hired someone new, and Sophie wanted to know who. I told her about you, about what you did. He paused. I don't usually bring people into her life. She's been through enough already, losing her mother. But I think she should meet you, if you're comfortable with that. Elena didn't know what to say. I'm not good with kids. You don't have to be good with kids. You just have to be yourself. He stood up. Come over for dinner tonight, 7 o'clock. Nothing formal, just pizza and a 5-year-old who asks too many questions. Adrian, please. And there was something in his voice that wasn't quite desperation, but wasn't far from it either. I want her to know that there are still good people in the world, people who do the right thing even when it's hard. Elena thought about the last time she'd had dinner with anyone who wasn't her sister or a coworker. It had been months, maybe longer. Okay, she said. 7 o'clock. His shoulders relaxed. Thank you. She spent the rest of the day hunting through financial records, cross-referencing wire transfers, building a timeline of Vincent Marsh's theft that stretched back not months, but years. By noon, she'd found 3 more forged signatures. By 3, she'd found 7. By 5, the number was 12, and the total amount stolen was hovering around $43 million. $43 million. Elena sat back in her chair and stared at the spreadsheet she'd built. $43 million, siphoned off slowly over the course of 4 years, hidden in acquisition costs and operating expenses, and a dozen other line items that no one would look at twice because they trusted Vincent Marsh to handle the details. She called Adrian. I found 12 forged transfers, she said. 43 million total. There was silence on the other end of the line. 43, Adrian repeated. Yes. Jesus Christ. He exhaled slowly. Send me everything. I'm calling Reeves now. Adrian, how did he think he'd get away with this? He didn't think he'd get away with it. He knew he'd get caught eventually. That's why he built the exit strategy. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the whole Pacific Rim scheme. He was planning to take 200 million and disappear. The 43 he'd already stolen was just insurance, in case the big score didn't work out. And if I hadn't been in that room, he'd be on a beach somewhere right now, drinking champagne and laughing at all of us. Adrian's voice was quiet. But you were in that room, Elena. You were there. And that's the only thing that matters. He hung up. Elena forwarded him the spreadsheet and then sat in her office staring at the numbers until her eyes blurred. $43 million. She tried to imagine that much money. Tried to picture what it looked like in a bank account, in a briefcase, in a life. She couldn't. The number was too big. It didn't connect to anything real. At 6:30, she changed into the only other outfit she'd brought, a simple black dress she'd bought for her father's funeral and hadn't worn since. It was too formal for pizza, but it was all she had. She brushed her hair out of the braid and let it fall around her shoulders. She looked at herself in the small mirror she'd hung on her office wall and thought, I look like I'm going to a wake. The car picked her up at 6:45. This time, it wasn't the Mercedes. It was a smaller car, a dark blue sedan with James behind the wheel and Tom in the passenger seat. Mr. Cross's house is in Greenwich, James said, about an hour with traffic. He lives in Connecticut? Weekdays he stays at a place in Tribeca. Weekends and evenings, he goes home to Sophie. James pulled out into traffic. He doesn't like her in the city during the week. Says it's too much noise, too many people. They drove north, out of Manhattan, across the bridge, through towns that got progressively quieter and greener until the houses were set back from the road behind gates and walls and old money. Adrian's house was at the end of a long driveway lined with oak trees, a white colonial with black shutters and a porch that wrapped around the front like an embrace. There was a swing set in the yard, a bike with training wheels lying on its side in the grass, a sandbox shaped like a turtle. It looked like a home, not a showpiece, a home. James parked and Tom opened Elena's door. "We'll be out here," Tom said. "You need anything? Just call." Elena walked up the porch steps and knocked. The door opened almost immediately. Adrian stood there in jeans and a gray sweater, barefoot, looking more relaxed than Elena had ever seen him. Behind him, a little girl with dark curls and gray eyes peeked around his leg. "You came," Adrian said. "You invited me." "I know, but I thought you might—" "Never mind." He stepped aside. "Come in. Sophie, this is Elena. Elena, this is Sophie." The little girl studied Elena with the serious intensity of someone conducting a very important evaluation. "You're the one who saved Daddy's company," Sophie said. Yes, I guess I am." "Do you have superpowers?" Elena blinked. "No, sorry." "That's okay. Daddy says the best superpower is paying attention. Were you paying attention?" "I was." "Good." Sophie grabbed Elena's hand. "Come see my room. I have a castle made out of blocks, and Daddy says it's going to fall down, but it hasn't yet." She pulled Elena into the house before Adrian could intervene. The inside was warm and lived in, with hardwood floors and bookshelves lining the walls and photographs everywhere. Sophie as a baby, Sophie on a beach, Sophie with a woman who had to be her mother, dark hair, kind eyes, laughing at something off camera. Sophie's room was upstairs, painted pale yellow with stars on the ceiling, and toys scattered across the floor in organized chaos. The block castle was indeed precarious, listing to one side like a drunk trying to stay upright. "See?" Sophie pointed. "It's still standing. It's very impressive. Do you want to help me build a moat?" "A moat?" "Around the castle, to keep the dragons out." Sophie was already gathering blocks. "Daddy says dragons aren't real, but I think he's wrong. I think they're just very good at hiding." Elena knelt down on the floor. She started placing blocks in a circle around the castle, and Sophie directed her with the confidence of a 5-year-old architect who had never met a problem she couldn't solve with enough imagination. Adrian appeared in the doorway 15 minutes later. "Pizza's here," he said. "We're building a moat," Sophie informed him. "I can see that. Will the moat be finished before the pizza gets cold?" Sophie considered this. Probably not. But the dragons can wait. They ate in the kitchen at a round table with mismatched chairs. The pizza was from a local place, thin crust, too much cheese, exactly the way Elena remembered pizza tasting when she was a kid. Sophie talked about school and her best friend Mia and a boy named Tyler who had pushed her on the playground and then apologized with a cookie. "What kind of cookie?" Adrian asked. "Chocolate chip. It was a good apology." "High-quality apology." "Very high quality." Elena watched them, father and daughter, moving around each other with the easy rhythm of people who knew each other's shapes. Adrian was different here, softer. The sharp edges he wore at work had been put away somewhere, filed under things Sophie doesn't need to see. After dinner, Sophie asked Elena to read her a story. They sat on the couch in the living room, Sophie tucked under Elena's arm with a book about a bear who couldn't sleep. Elena read slowly, stumbling over some of the words because it had been a long time since she'd read out loud to anyone, and Sophie didn't seem to mind. By the last page, the little girl's eyes were drooping. "Time for bed," Adrian said gently. "But I'm not tired." "You're falling asleep on Elena's shoulder." "That doesn't mean I'm tired. It means Elena's comfortable." Adrian smiled. "Come on, kiddo. Upstairs. Teeth? Pajamas? Bed?" Sophie hugged Elena before she left. It was a quick hug, the kind kids give when they're already thinking about the next thing, but it landed somewhere in Elena's chest and stayed there. After Sophie was upstairs, Adrian poured 2 glasses of wine, and they sat on the porch in the dark, listening to the crickets and the distant sound of a dog barking. "Thank you for coming," Adrian said. "Thank you for inviting me." "She liked you." "How can you tell?" "She hugged you. Sophie doesn't hug people she doesn't like. She barely hugs people she does like. He took a sip of wine. Her mother died when she was 2. Brain aneurysm. No warning, no time to prepare. One morning, Rachel was making pancakes, and by lunch, she was gone. Elena's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Sophie doesn't remember her. Not really. Sometimes she'll see a photo and say, that's mommy, but it's more like memorization than memory. I don't know if that's better or worse. It's probably both. Yeah. He stared out at the dark yard. I try to be enough for her, father and mother both. But I don't know if I am. I work too much. I'm not patient enough. I forget to pack her lunch half the time. You're doing fine. You've known her for 3 hours, and in those 3 hours I watched her build a castle, eat pizza, and fall asleep feeling safe. That's not nothing, Adrian. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Elena felt something shift in the air between them, something unnamed and complicated. You're different than I thought you'd be, he said. Different how? I don't know, stronger maybe. Or not stronger, steadier. He paused. Most people would have walked away by now, the security detail, the FBI, the threat from Marsh and his friends. Most people would have taken the money and disappeared. I'm not most people. No. He smiled. You're really not. Elena's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her blood went cold. It was a text from an unknown number. You made a mistake, Miss Marlowe. People who interfere in other people's business tend to regret it. Attached was a photograph. Elena standing outside her apartment building that morning. The timestamp read 5:47 a.m. Adrian saw her face change. What is it? She handed him the phone. He read the text. His jaw tightened. When did you get this? Just now. He was already dialing. Tom, get up here. Now. Tom and James were on the porch in under 30 seconds. Adrian showed them the text. Someone was watching her building this morning, Adrian said. 5:47. That's before you picked her up. We swept the area, Tom said. There was no one. Well, someone was there, with a camera. And they just sent Elena a threat. James took the phone and studied the photo. This was taken from across the street. Second floor window, probably. We can check security cameras, see if we can get a face. Do it. Adrian handed the phone back to Elena. And I want surveillance on her building, 24/7. If anyone so much as looks at that building wrong, I want to know about it. Yes, sir. Tom and James walked back to the car. Elena stood on the porch with the phone in her hand, looking at the photograph of herself, and she felt violated in a way she couldn't quite name. They're trying to scare you, Adrian said. It's working. I know. But here's the thing. People who send threats like this, they're usually bluffing. If they were going to do something, they'd just do it. They wouldn't warn you first. Usually, Elena repeated. Not always. Not always, he admitted, which is why you're staying here tonight. She looked at him. What? You're not going back to that apartment, not until we figure out who sent this and neutralize the threat. Adrian, I can't just... Yes, you can. There are 4 guest rooms upstairs. Pick one. Tom and James will stay in the driveway. And in the morning, we'll figure out next steps. He crossed his arms. This isn't a request, Elena. She wanted to argue, but the truth was, she didn't want to go back to her apartment. Not tonight. Not with someone watching from across the street, waiting for her to be alone. Okay, she said. Thank you. He showed her to a room at the end of the hall, pale blue walls and a bed with too many pillows, and a window that looked out over the backyard. There was a bathroom attached, and Adrian disappeared for a minute before returning with a toothbrush still in its package and a t-shirt that said, Cross Holdings 5K Fun Run 2018. It's from a charity thing, he said. It'll be huge on you, but it's clean. It's perfect. He lingered in the doorway. If you need anything, I'll be fine. Right, okay. Good night, Elena. Good night. He closed the door. Elena stood in the middle of the room and listened to his footsteps retreat down the hallway. Then she sat on the bed and pulled out her phone and looked at the text again. You made a mistake, Miss Marlowe. She didn't delete it. She forwarded it to Agent Reeves with a short message. Received this tonight. Thought you should know. Then she changed into Adrian's t-shirt, which did indeed swallow her whole, and she brushed her teeth and washed her face and climbed into the guest bed that was softer than anything she'd slept on in years. She didn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft, careful footsteps. She sat up, her heart pounding, and then the door cracked open and a small face peered in. "Sophie?" Elena whispered. "I had a bad dream." The little girl's voice was small. "Can I come in? Does your dad know you're up?" "He's asleep. He doesn't sleep good, but when he does, I don't wake him up. That's the rule." Elena pulled back the covers. "Come here." Sophie climbed into the bed and curled up next to Elena, her small body warm and solid. She smelled like children's shampoo and something sweet Elena couldn't identify. "What was your dream about?" Elena asked. "Dragons, but not the good kind. The kind that eat castles. Those are the worst kind." "I know." Sophie was quiet for a moment. "Are you scared of dragons?" Elena thought about the text message, the photograph, the men in the restaurant who had tried to destroy everything Adrian had built. "Sometimes," she said, "but I'm trying not to be." "Daddy says being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you're scared, but you do the thing anyway. Your dad is very smart." "I know," Sophie yawned. "Will you stay here? In this house?" "Just for tonight." "What about tomorrow?" "I don't know yet." "I hope you stay. I like you." "I like you too, Sophie." The little girl fell asleep within minutes, her breathing slow and even. Elena lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, and she thought about bravery and fear and the difference between the two. At some point, she must have dozed off, because when she woke up, the room was full of early morning light, and Sophie was gone. Elena found her downstairs in the kitchen with Adrian, both of them still in pajamas, making pancakes. "You're up," Adrian said. "Coffee?" "Please." He poured her a cup. Their hands touched when he handed it to her, and he didn't pull away immediately. "Reeves called," he said. "She got your text. She's sending someone to dust your apartment for prints, check the building's security cameras, and she wants to meet with you today. 2 o'clock. My office." "Okay." She also said the Cayman authorities picked up Vincent last night. They're extraditing him back to New York. He'll be in custody by tomorrow morning. Elena felt something release in her chest. "That's good. It's a start." Adrian flipped a pancake. "But we still don't know who sent you that text. Could be Marsh. Could be the men from the restaurant. Could be someone else entirely." "Comforting. I'm not trying to comfort you. I'm trying to be honest." He slid the pancake onto a plate and handed it to Sophie. "Eat, and then go get dressed. We need to leave in 45 minutes." After breakfast, Elena borrowed some clothes from a closet full of things that had belonged to Adrian's wife. She found a simple gray dress that fit reasonably well and a cardigan that was soft and smelled faintly of lavender. She felt strange wearing a dead woman's clothes, but Adrian had insisted, and she didn't have anything else. The drive back to the city was quiet. Sophie fell asleep in her car seat, and Adrian worked on his laptop, and Elena watched the suburbs give way to highways, give way to the jagged skyline of Manhattan, rising like broken teeth against the morning sky. At the office, Reeves was waiting with Donnelly and a new agent Elena hadn't met before, a younger woman with sharp eyes and sharper questions. They went through the timeline again. The text, the photo, the possible suspects. By the end of the meeting, Elena's head was pounding, and she had told the same story so many times it didn't feel like her story anymore. "We'll find who sent it," Reeves said, "but in the meantime, you need to be careful. Vary your routine. Don't go anywhere alone, and if you get another message, don't respond. Just forward it to me immediately." "I will." After the agents left, Adrian walked Elena back to her office. "You okay?" he asked. "I don't know. Ask me in a week." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. Safe. Not in that apartment. I can't stay at your house forever, Adrian. I know. But you can stay there until we figure this out. Until it's safe." "And if it's never safe?" He didn't have an answer for that. Elena spent the rest of the day going through more financial records, building the case against Vincent Marsh piece by piece. By 5 o'clock, she had a migraine in a spreadsheet that proved Marsh had been stealing from Cross Holdings for nearly 5 years. The total was now up to $52 million. $52 million. She sent the file to Adrian and the FBI and then put her head down on her desk and closed her eyes. Her phone buzzed. Another text. Another unknown number. "Last warning, Miss Marlowe. Walk away now, or what happens next is on you."
This time, there was no photo, just the words. Elena's hands were shaking when she forwarded it to Reeves. Then she called Adrian. "They sent another one," she said. He was at her office in under a minute. He read the text, his face darkening. "That's it," he said. "You're not going anywhere without security. Not to get coffee, not to the bathroom, nowhere. And I'm calling a friend at NYPD. Someone I trust. We're getting unmarked cars on this. Real surveillance, not just Tom and James sitting in a driveway." "Adrian, no arguments, Elena. These people are escalating. First a photo, now a threat. Next could be—" He stopped. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. That night, they drove back to Greenwich. Sophie was waiting on the porch when they pulled up, and she ran to Elena and hugged her legs. "You came back," she said. "I did." "Good. I saved you a seat at dinner." They ate spaghetti and talked about nothing important, and after Sophie went to bed, Adrian poured 2 glasses of whiskey, and they sat on the porch again, watching the dark. "How long can we keep doing this?" Elena asked. "Doing what?" "Pretending everything's fine, that I'm just staying here as a guest. That those texts aren't—" She stopped. "I don't want Sophie to get hurt because of me. Sophie's not going to get hurt. I won't let that happen." "You can't control everything, Adrian. I can try." He looked at her. "You saved my daughter's future, Elena. The least I can do is keep you safe while we figure this out." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that safety was something you could buy with money and security guards and unmarked police cars. But she'd grown up in Queens, in a world where safety was a myth people told themselves before bed. "What if we don't figure it out?" she asked. "What if they never stop?" Adrian was quiet for a long time. "Then we don't stop either," he said finally. "We keep going, we keep fighting, because the alternative is letting them win, and I don't know about you, but I'm not very good at losing." Elena looked at him, sitting there in the dark, this man who had everything and nothing, who was trying to hold together an empire and a daughter, and now, somehow, her. "Neither am I," she said. And somewhere out there in the night, someone was watching. Someone was waiting. Someone was planning their next move. But for now, in this moment, on this porch, Elena Marlowe was not alone. And that would have to be enough. The call came at 11:43 that night. Elena was in the guest room, trying to read a book she'd found on the shelf downstairs, when her phone lit up with a number she didn't recognize. Not a text this time, a call. She almost didn't answer, but something made her thumb hit the green button. "Miss Marlowe?" The voice was smooth, accented, familiar in a way that made her skin crawl. "I hope I'm not calling too late." It was the eldest of the 3 men from the restaurant, the one with the jade cufflinks and the black eyes that saw through everything. Elena sat up, her heart hammering. "How did you get this number?" "The same way I got the photograph of you this morning. The same way I know you're staying in Greenwich right now, in Adrian Cross's home, sleeping in the room at the end of the hall." He paused. "You have 15 minutes to get to a car, alone, no security, no Mr. Cross, just you. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, the $10 million currently frozen in Shanghai will be released to our account at midnight, and because I have information about Vincent Marsh that you need to hear, information that will save Mr. Cross's company and possibly his life." Elena's mouth went dry. "You're lying." "Perhaps, but can you afford to find out?" His voice was almost gentle. 15 minutes, Miss Marlowe. There's a coffee shop 3 blocks from the house. Closes at midnight. I'll be waiting in the back booth. Come alone or don't come at all." The line went dead. Elena stared at her phone. Every instinct she had was screaming at her not to go. This was a trap. Obviously a trap. The kind of trap that ended with her disappearing and Adrian finding out about it on the morning news. But what if it wasn't? What if this man really did have information? What if the 10 million really was about to be released? She looked at the time. 11:44. 14 minutes. She should wake Adrian. She should call Reeves. She should do anything except what she was about to do. Instead, Elena pulled on jeans and a sweater, slipped her phone into her pocket, and walked down the hallway as quietly as she could. The house was dark except for a light under Adrian's door. She could hear him on the phone, his voice low and tense, probably talking to his lawyers about Vincent Marsh's extradition. She didn't knock. She walked downstairs, past Sophie's room where the little girl was sleeping with her stuffed rabbit,
past the kitchen where they'd eaten spaghetti 3 hours ago, and out the back door into the yard. Tom was in the driveway. Elena could see the glow of his phone through the windshield. She stayed low, moved through the shadows along the fence line, and slipped out through the side gate that led to the street. The coffee shop was exactly 3 blocks away, a small place with dirty windows and a neon sign that flickered open in sad pink letters. Elena pushed through the door at 11:52. The man was waiting in the back booth, just like he'd said. He was alone, dressed in a black coat, his hands folded on the table in front of him. When he saw her, he smiled. "Miss Marlowe, thank you for coming." Elena didn't sit down. "You have 2 minutes. Talk. Please. Sit. This will take longer than 2 minutes, and I'd prefer not to shout." She sat, but she kept her hand in her pocket, wrapped around her phone, ready to call for help if she needed it. The man studied her for a moment. "You're very brave. Or very foolish. I haven't decided which yet." "I'm neither. I'm just tired of being threatened by men who think I don't understand what they're saying." He laughed. It was a genuine laugh, warm and surprising. "Yes, that was a mistake on my part. I underestimated you. We all did." "Good. Now tell me what you know about Vincent Marsh." "Vincent Marsh is not the problem, Miss Marlowe. He never was. He was simply, how do you say, the middleman, the person who made introductions, who smoothed the way, who collected his fee and disappeared. The real architect of this scheme is someone much closer to Mr. Cross." Elena's stomach turned cold. "Who?" "David Kim." She stared at him. "Adrian's lawyer." "Yes, Mr. Kim has been working with us for 18 months. He structured the Pacific Rim acquisition. He drafted the contracts. He ensured that every piece of paper looked legitimate while hiding the truth underneath." The man leaned forward. "Vincent Marsh was greedy and stupid. David Kim is neither, which makes him far more dangerous. You're lying. David's been helping Adrian fight this. He's the one who put you on the phone with Huang Wei Min in Shanghai." "Yes, because he knew the account would be frozen, because he knew it would buy him time to move the real money." "The 43 million you found? That was Vincent's amateur hour. The 200 million that was supposed to come through Pacific Rim? That's being rerouted as we speak, to an account David controls, and at midnight it completes." Elena felt like she'd been punched. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because David Kim betrayed us too. He promised us a cut of the money, 30%. Instead, he's planning to take it all and frame us for the fraud. And I don't appreciate being used, Miss Marlowe, so I'm giving you a gift, the truth. What you do with it is your choice. If this is true, why not go to the police yourself? Because I am, as you Americans say, not without sin. Going to the police would mean admitting my involvement. I prefer to remain anonymous." He slid a small envelope across the table. Inside is a flash drive, bank records, email chains, everything you need to prove David Kim's involvement. Give it to the FBI or give it to Mr. Cross. I don't care. But do it before midnight or $200 million disappears forever. Elena picked up the envelope. It was light, almost weightless. "How do I know this isn't fake?" "You don't, but you're a smart woman, Miss Marlowe. Smarter than anyone gave you credit for. Look at the files, verify them. You'll know the truth when you see it." He stood up. "One more thing," he said. "The threats you've been receiving, the texts, those weren't from us. Those were from David Kim trying to scare you into silence. He knows you're the key witness. Without you, there's no case. So he's been trying to make you disappear, one way or another." Elena's blood ran cold. "He's been watching me?" "He hired people to watch you. People who are very good at not being seen." The man buttoned his coat. "But you're safe now, for the moment, because I've made it clear to David that if anything happens to you, I will personally ensure he never sees that 200 million, or the light of day." "Why would you protect me?" "I'm not protecting you, Miss Marlowe. I'm protecting my interests. You just happen to benefit from that." He walked toward the door, then paused. "You should leave, now, and you should run, not walk, back to Mr. Cross's house. You have 7 minutes until midnight." He left. Elena sat in the booth, holding the envelope, trying to make sense of what had just happened. David Kim, Adrian's lawyer. The man who had sat across from her in the conference room, who had twisted his wedding ring and taken notes and looked like the most boring, trustworthy person in the world. She opened the envelope, pulled out the flash drive. It was small and black and unremarkable. She stood up. She ran. By the time she reached Adrian's house, she was gasping for air and her hands were shaking so hard she could barely get her phone out. She texted him, "Come outside. Now. Don't ask questions." He was on the porch in 30 seconds, barefoot, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking terrified. "Elena, where the hell were you? Tom said you disappeared and I've been—" She shoved the flash drive into his hand. "David Kim. He's been working with the men from the restaurant. He's stealing $200 million. Right now. It completes at midnight." Adrian stared at the flash drive. "What are you talking about?" "I'll explain later. How much time do we have?" He looked at his phone. 4 minutes. "Then we need to call the bank. Now." They ran inside. Adrian fired up his laptop at the kitchen table, plugged in the flash drive, and Elena watched his face change as he scrolled through the files. Bank records, wire authorizations, email chains between David Kim and someone named Li Jiao, the eldest of the 3 men from the restaurant, planning every detail of the fraud. "Son of a bitch," Adrian whispered. "David, I've known him for 10 years. He was at my wedding. Call the bank, Adrian." He grabbed his phone and dialed. Someone answered on the 4th ring, groggy and annoyed. "This is Adrian Cross. I need to speak to Margaret Chen in international transfers. Now." "Mr. Cross, it's almost midnight. I don't care what time it is. Get me Margaret, or I will personally ensure you never work in banking again." There was a pause. Then hold music. Elena watched the clock. 11:58. "Come on," Adrian muttered. "Come on, Margaret. Pick up." 11:59. "Margaret Chen speaking." "Margaret, it's Adrian Cross. I need you to freeze all outgoing transfers from Cross Holdings accounts immediately." "Mr. Cross, I can't just freeze. There's a $200 million wire about to complete. It's fraudulent, authorized by someone who doesn't have authority. I need you to stop it. Sir, if the wire has already been initiated, I can't—"
"Margaret," Adrian's voice was steel. "You and I have worked together for 8 years. Have I ever lied to you?" A pause. "No, sir." "Then trust me. Stop that wire. Right now." Elena heard typing on the other end of the line. The seconds ticked past. Midnight came and went. "Mr. Cross," Margaret said slowly, "there is a wire here. 200 million. To an offshore account in the British Virgin Islands. It was set to complete at midnight." "Was? I've placed a hold on it, pending verification of authorization." Adrian closed his eyes. "Thank you, Margaret. I'll have documentation to you within the hour proving that transfer is fraudulent, and I owe you the best bottle of wine money can buy." "I'll hold you to that, Mr. Cross." He hung up. He sat back in his chair. He looked at Elena. "How did you know?" he asked. "Li Jiao called me, told me to meet him, gave me the flash drive." She sat down across from him. "He said David betrayed them too, that he was trying to take all the money and frame them for it." "And you believed him?" "I didn't have a choice. If he was telling the truth and I did nothing, you'd lose everything. If he was lying, the worst that happened was I wasted 20 minutes. She paused. "And he was telling the truth. You saw the files." Adrian ran a hand through his hair. "I need to call Reeves, and I need to call the NYPD, and I need to—" He stopped. He looked at her. "You left the house alone, in the middle of the night, after receiving death threats, to meet with a man who tried to destroy my company." "Yes. That was incredibly stupid. I know. You could have been killed. I know. Don't do it again." "I won't." He stood up. He walked around the table. He pulled her into a hug, and Elena stood there frozen for a moment before her arms came up and wrapped around him. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Again." "You're welcome. Again." They called Reeves at 12:15. She arrived with Donnelly and 4 other agents at 1 in the morning, and by 2, they had David Kim in custody. He'd been at his office in Midtown, celebrating with a bottle of scotch and a plane ticket to the Cayman Islands, when the agents came through the door. He didn't go quietly. He threatened lawsuits, claimed it was all a misunderstanding, said Adrian had no proof. And then Reeves showed him the flash drive,
and David Kim's face went the color of old paper. "You're done," Reeves said. "Wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. You're looking at 40 years, Mr. Kim, maybe more." David looked at Adrian. "You have to understand, I needed the money, the debt, my wife's medical bills. I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice," Adrian said. "You made yours. Now you get to live with it." They took him away in handcuffs. Vincent Marsh landed at JFK the next morning and was arrested on the tarmac. He tried to run, got 10 feet, and was tackled by 2 federal agents who looked like they'd been waiting for an excuse to tackle someone all week. The footage made the evening news. Li Jiao and the other 2 men from the restaurant were declared persona non grata by the State Department and banned from entering the United States. The shell company they'd created dissolved overnight, and the Chinese government, embarrassed by the international attention, opened their own investigation. The $10 million was returned to Cross Holdings within a week. The $200 million never left the account, and the $52 million Vincent Marsh had stolen over 5 years was slowly being recovered from offshore accounts and shell companies all over the world. It wasn't perfect. Some of the money was gone forever, hidden too well, or spent too fast. But it was enough. Enough to keep the company running. Enough to hire back the people who would have been laid off. Enough to save Sophie's future. Elena moved out of Adrian's house 2 weeks later, not back to her apartment in Astoria. Adrian had convinced her to let the company pay for a place in the city, something safer, something with a doorman and a security system and windows that didn't look out onto dumpsters. She took the job as head of special operations. Turned out she was good at it, very good. She had a talent for seeing patterns other people missed, for listening to what wasn't being said, for finding the truth buried underneath the paperwork. She also had a talent for languages. Within 6 months, Adrian had her sitting in on negotiations with partners in Japan, Brazil, Germany, translating not just words but intentions, reading the room in ways that saved deals before they fell apart. She sent money to Claire in Buffalo, enough to cover the medical bills and then some, enough for her sister to quit her second job and focus on getting well. Claire cried on the phone when the transfer went through, and Elena cried too. And they didn't say much else because some things didn't need words. Elena visited her mother every Sunday. The old woman still didn't recognize her most days, but sometimes, when Elena spoke to her in Polish, something would flicker in her eyes. A memory. A ghost of recognition. It was enough. 3 months after the night at the coffee shop, Adrian invited Elena to dinner. Not at his house. At a restaurant. A nice one. The kind with tablecloths and candles and waiters who moved like shadows. "This feels like a date," Elena said, sitting down across from him. "Does it?" Adrian looked amused. "I thought it was just 2 colleagues having dinner. Colleagues don't usually pick restaurants with 3 Michelin stars." "Fair point." He poured her a glass of wine. "Okay, it's a date. Is that a problem?" Elena thought about it. About Adrian and his gray eyes and his daughter who built castles out of blocks. About the last 3 months of working beside him, learning how to navigate a world she'd never thought she'd be part of. About the fact that she was still, sometimes, waiting for someone to figure out she didn't belong. "No," she said, "it's not a problem." "Good, because I've been wanting to ask you for a while, but I didn't know if it was appropriate. Boss, employee, power dynamics, all that. It's definitely not appropriate." "I know," he smiled, "but I'm asking anyway." They talked through dinner, about work, about Sophie, about the trial that was coming up in 6 months, where Elena would testify against Vincent Marsh and David Kim, and probably have to relive the worst night of her life in front of a courtroom full of strangers. "I'll be there," Adrian said. "The whole time, front row, you won't be alone." "I know. And after the trial I was thinking," he paused. "Sophie wants to go to Disney World. I was thinking maybe you'd come with us, if you want. No pressure." Elena pictured it. The 3 of them. Theme parks and mouse ears and Sophie laughing on a roller coaster. A family that wasn't quite a family, but might be someday, if they were careful. "I'd like that," she said. They left the restaurant around 10 and walked through the city, past the late-night crowds and the taxis and the street vendors selling pretzels and dreams. At some point, Adrian took her hand and Elena let him, and they walked like that for blocks without saying anything. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said finally. "Anything. That night at the Meridian. When you asked me to sit down at the table, You said your father told you the most important person in the room is the one nobody notices. Did he really say that? Adrian was quiet for a moment. No, I made that up, in the moment, because I saw your face change when that man made his joke, and I knew you'd understood something the rest of us hadn't, and I needed you to tell me what it was. So you manipulated me. I gave you permission to speak. There's a difference. He looked at her. You saved my life that night, Elena, and Sophie's future, and you did it because you're brave and honest and you couldn't stand watching bad people win. Nobody made you do that. I just made it easier for you to do what you were already going to do. She thought about that, about the moment she'd opened her mouth in that soundproofed room and changed the course of 3 lives. About whether she would have done it if Adrian hadn't asked her to sit down, if he hadn't looked at her like she mattered. She didn't know. My father used to say that courage isn't something you have, she said. It's something you practice. Like speaking a language. You do it enough times, it becomes natural. Was he right? I don't know yet. Ask me in a few years. Adrian smiled. I will. They walked back to her building, and Adrian kissed her goodnight on the sidewalk under the streetlights, and it was gentle and careful and nothing like the dramatic kisses in movies. It was real, imperfect, human. I'll see you tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow, she agreed. She rode the elevator up to her apartment, the one with the doorman and the security system, and the windows that looked out over the city instead of an alley. She made tea. She sat on the couch. She pulled out her phone and looked at the last text she'd gotten from the unknown number. Last warning, Miss Marlowe. She deleted it. Then she opened a new message and wrote to her sister. I think I'm happy. I don't know if I've ever been happy before. Not like this. Not in a way that feels real. Is this what it's supposed to feel like? Claire wrote back 3 minutes later. Yes, dummy. That's what it feels like. Don't screw it up. Elena laughed. She set down her phone. She looked around her apartment at the furniture she'd bought with her first real paycheck, at the books she was finally reading because she had time, at the photograph on the shelf of her and Sophie and Adrian at a park in Greenwich, all 3 of them squinting into the sun. She thought about her father, about what he would say if he could see her now. Probably something about Jade, about pressure and value and becoming. She thought about this girl she'd been 3 months ago, the one who poured wine and folded napkins and tried to be invisible because being seen meant being hurt. That girl was gone. Not erased exactly, just transformed. Pressure into something harder, something that could cut if it needed to. The trial came and went. Elena testified for 3 days, and it was brutal and exhausting and exactly as hard as she'd thought it would be. David Kim's lawyer tried to paint her as a liar, an opportunist, someone trying to get close to a billionaire by making up stories. But the evidence didn't lie. The flash drive didn't lie. And when Elena spoke in Mandarin, translating the emails and the bank records and the whispered conversations that had started this whole thing, the jury believed her. Both men were convicted. Vincent Marsh got 22 years. David Kim got 35. After the verdict, Adrian took Elena and Sophie to Disney World like he'd promised. They rode roller coasters and ate too much ice cream and watched fireworks over the castle, and Sophie fell asleep on the monorail with her head on Elena's shoulder. She loves you, Adrian said quietly. I love her too. I'm not just talking about Sophie. Elena looked at him. I know. 6 months after that, Adrian proposed. Not with a big production or a flash mob or anything they'd have to explain to people later with embarrassment. Just the 2 of them in his kitchen in Greenwich, making pancakes on a Sunday morning while Sophie built another castle in the living room. I don't have a ring yet, he said. I wanted to ask you first. See if you'd even say yes before I spent money on something you might hate. That's very practical. I'm a practical man. You're a billionaire who just proposed to me while making pancakes. You're not that practical. He laughed. Fair. So what do you say? Elena thought about everything that had happened. The restaurant, the wire transfer, the threats, the trials, the slow, careful building of something that looked like a life. She thought about trust, about how hard it was to give and how easily it could be broken, about how Adrian had given it to her anyway, over and over, until she'd finally learned to hold it without crushing it. Yes, she said, obviously yes. They got married in the fall, in the backyard of the house in Greenwich, with Sophie as the flower girl and Claire as the maid of honor, and a small group of people who mattered, watching from chairs they'd set up under the oak trees. No press, no photographers, just them. At the reception, Rachel made a toast. To Elena, she said, raising her glass. The woman who saved us all by doing something none of us were brave enough to do. She spoke up. Everyone drank to that. Later, when the guests had gone home and Sophie was asleep upstairs and the caterers were packing up the last of the dishes, Elena and Adrian sat on the porch, watching the dark. Do you ever think about that night? Elena asked. At the Meridian? Every day. Do you wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been there? I try not to, but yes. He looked at her. I'd be bankrupt. Sophie would have grown up knowing I'd lost everything, and I'd probably be alone. Still, he paused. You changed my life, Elena, completely, and I don't think I've ever properly thanked you for that. You married me. I think that counts. Maybe, he smiled, but I'll keep thanking you anyway, just to be sure. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder and thought about visibility, about how she'd spent 30 years trying to be invisible, and how one night she'd chosen to be seen, and how that choice had broken open her life like a door she didn't know existed. She thought about the people who had tried to hurt her, Vincent Marsh in his cell, counting down the years. David Kim in his, probably still convinced he'd been right, that he'd had no choice. The men from the restaurant, banned from a country they'd tried to bleed dry. She didn't feel sorry for them, but she didn't feel triumphant either. She just felt tired and grateful and aware, in a way she'd never been before, of how fragile everything was, how easily it could have gone another way. Elena, Adrian said. Yeah? Thank you for saying yes to all of it. She lifted her head and kissed him, and it was still imperfect and still human and still real. You're welcome, she said. And somewhere in the house, Sophie was dreaming about castles that didn't fall down, about dragons that learned to be kind, about a world where the people you loved stayed, and the people who tried to hurt you disappeared. And in the morning, Elena would wake up in a life she'd built one brave word at a time, and she would make pancakes, and she would be happy. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. It never would be. But because she'd learned something her father had been trying to teach her all along, that being seen meant being vulnerable, but it also meant being alive, really alive, in a way that mattered. And that some risks were worth taking, some words were worth saying, some people were worth trusting, even when you were scared, especially when you were scared, because courage, like language, was something you practiced until it became natural. And Elena Marlowe had been practicing for 30 years. She was fluent now.